used to go bowling quite often with my friends when I was young. I'm talking like 12, 13. There was a bowling alley down the block from my friends and I, and so we'd go there on weekends. The bowling alley has been closed for years, but when it was open, it was super cheap and affordable, perfect for a bunch of young teenagers who didn't have money of their own. This one weekend, I went with my friends Jacob, Josh, and Mikey to the bowling alley. We always went at night. It was likely around 8 p.m. The bowling alley was always crowded on the weekends, and sometimes we'd see familiar faces. There was this older man who would sometimes be there alone, bowling on the adult side of the bowling alley where alcohol was served. We always played on the non-alcoholic side. How we took notice to that man was because he'd sometimes just weirdly walk down the entire bowling alley, passing every lane, watching people bowling. Then we'd notice him end up back at his lane all by himself. We nicknamed him Creeper Bob after maybe the third time seeing him. Tonight there was a lane open next to us, and guess who out of nowhere sat next to us? Bob, or whatever his real name was, but I'll keep referring to him as Bob. He was setting up a game on the lane next to us by himself, and it wasn't long until he started trying to talk to us. He started making comments on our form, and every so often interrupting our conversation to tell us weird things like how long he's been coming here. Then eventually he said something really weird, that he watches us play every weekend from across the bowling alley, and he decided to come over and introduce himself tonight. He played it off like he was trying to be some kind of bowling teacher to us, but really it was just annoying and most of all uncomfortable. Bob at one point entered our lane as I was up to bowl, and he grabbed my wrist with his hands to position me into an allegedly better form. I never gave him permission to touch me, nor did I ask for his guidance. We were only like 13 though. None of us stood up and said, "Yo, get lost," or something like that. I could just feel the unease amongst my friends. Every moment of that man touching me, I felt more and more disgusted. We cut our night at the bowling alley short because of him. We used the money that we would have used on more games on getting pizza instead at a pizza place further out the block. When we came out, Jacob and Mikey went their own ways since they lived on a different block. Josh and I walked back down the other way in the direction of our houses. As we did, the sound of a car engine starting made us turn around. We noticed an old SUV like a Ford Explorer banging a three-point turn. We both imagined the possibility of it being Creeper Bob. The SUV started slowly tailing us as we walked down the street, so we picked up our pace. Then the SUV pulled up right alongside us, and the window rolled down. It was in fact the man from the bowling alley. He said out the window that he could offer us a ride home. We said no thanks. He replied it's not safe for a couple kids to be walking around late at night. We weren't even really that young. We were young teenagers, not little kids, and it was crazy that he thought we were young enough to trick into getting into a car. When we made it clear we weren't getting in, he pulled to the side of the road and parked his car. Josh and I decided to start jogging home. When we reached the intersection where we'd split off, we said bye and I continued jogging home. By the time I made it back, I was out of breath. Running after eating pizza is not a good idea. My dad was already asleep because he worked weekends. My mom was out with her girlfriends most likely, and the same was probably the case with my sister, so I wasn't supposed to ring the bell because my dad didn't want to be woken up. I went around back to get the key we had for the back door, which was hidden in the shed. When I got out from the shed, I thought I heard something, and I should have listened to my gut. I went to the back door to unlock it, and as I opened the door, I heard the sound of someone running up behind me. Before I could fully turn around, someone pushed me inside the house, covering my mouth and wrapping their arm around my neck. I wasn't able to see who it was because I couldn't turn my head. I scratched and clawed at the man's hand until I could move my mouth just enough out of the grip of his hand and scream, "Dad." I may have only been 13, but I was able to put up enough of a fight to get him to lose his grip a few times, allowing me to scream. This undoubtedly scared him off as he finally let go for good and ran outside. I didn't look back. I ran up the half flight of stairs to the main floor and yelled for my dad. My dad came rushing out of his room, and after telling him what just happened, he checked the backyard and all around the property and then came back inside. I told him about the man from the bowling alley, how we nicknamed him Creeper Bob, how he followed Josh and I in his SUV after admitting to stalking us at the bowling alley. My dad filed a police report and tried getting the bowling alley to release the video surveillance from that night, but they refused. I was never allowed to go back there after my mom found out about this. Not that I'd ever want to. The crazy thing is, technically I can't say with 100% certainty that the man who came in behind me and grabbed me was the man from the bowling alley. But realistically, how slim are the chances that it wasn't him? When I was a teenager, my close group of friends were, I guess, what you'd call delinquents. We liked causing trouble, breaking rules, and messing around in places we didn't belong. I grew up in a suburb in northern New Jersey, so I guess you could say we were just spoiled kids with nothing better to do. Looking back, the way we passed the time was a little silly, but there's nothing I can do about that now. Anyway, one of the things we really liked to do was to go exploring in the late hours of the night. Usually we explored abandoned buildings, but not always. We actually got banned from our middle school after jumping through an open window, but that's a story for another time. This particular night, we were planning on executing a riskier task. There were 5 of us: me, Chip, Jason, Rowan, and Anish. Rowan had a tendency to bounce around from job to job, which was kind of a running joke in our squad. He'd lose jobs as quickly as he'd get them, usually for the dumbest reasons you can imagine. He had just picked up a gig as an attendant at a bowling alley a few towns over from us. I'm sure you could see where this is going. He had been entrusted the key to close up the place the night before. Anish was a master of persuasion, and he somehow convinced Rowan to let us explore the bowling alley at like 3 a.m. I'm telling you, Anish could convince someone to give them their kidney. That's how persistent he was. I haven't heard from him in a while. I think he might actually be in jail right now. Anyway, the 5 of us agreed to get a little drunk before going. We all had a substantial amount to drink except for Jason, who refused to go anywhere unless he was the one driving. His dad had a really nice BMW, and Jason liked being able to end our links when he got tired. After getting a little buzzed, James drove the 5 of us to the location. I was the heavy drinker of the squad. It's not something I'm proud of, but it's just who I was at that point in my life. Because of this, I usually took things a little less seriously than I should have, especially when it came to dangerous or risky situations. Rowan unlocked the door, and the 5 of us made our way inside. Chip was usually the most cautious, and he kept chiding us to be careful in his hilariously high-pitched voice. Rowan told us we couldn't actually do any bowling right now, which we were all a little upset about. I had the genius idea of doing some makeshift sliding on the lanes as if they were slip-and-slides. Since we were drunk, this was actually pretty fun. The 5 of us soon tired ourselves out and decided we wanted to do some exploring. We asked Rowan if there were any back rooms we could check out, and he told us there were. We made our way into the employee-only area, and Rowan led us to some kind of storage room. We started poking around and flipping things over, just being stupid and careless. We figured Rowan was going to get fired anyway, so we weren't too concerned with messing things up. As we started getting bored, we heard a deafening bump from below us. The 5 of us froze, staring at each other. Jason, the only sober one in the group, asked if the place had a basement. Rowan looked just as shocked as we were, and told that he had no prior knowledge of a potential basement. Anish grinned, eager to continue exploring. Chip seemed really nervous, telling us that we were probably going to end up getting Rowan fired. We were whispering now, arguing whether we wanted to go look for this hypothetical basement. Just then, Jason lifted the edge of a rug nestled in the corner, revealing a hatch. We were shocked. The atmosphere in the room instantly shifted with the realization that the situation was now serious. Even if we had found the way into the basement, the sound we heard was still unexplained. I don't think any of us really wanted to go down there, but Jason made the first move in his classic level-headed style. He flung the latch open and stared down at the old, rusted ladder leading into the darkness. "Screw this," whispered Chip, motioning for us to leave. Jason ignored him and went for the stairs. He pulled out his phone and shined the flashlight into the blackness. Without another word, he descended into the abyss. I could tell Rowan, Anish, and Chip were a little scared, understandably. I still had a lot of liquid confidence, so I decided I'd go next. Anish followed behind me and Rowan brought up the rear. Chip refused to come down with us. The 4 of us pulled out our phone flashlights and began exploring the basement that had been hidden for some reason. It was filled with dust and cardboard boxes, stacked up to the ceiling. There was nothing else down there, or at least that's what we originally thought. Anish noticed a door in the corner, and we walked over to it. Jason put his hand on the handle, but a split second before he was going to open it, we heard a distinctive bump come from the other side, which sounded identical to the one we heard earlier. We looked around at each other, with horrified looks on our faces. I could tell we were all thinking the same thing. An animal, maybe? No shot, it was too loud to be an animal. I was pretty freaked out at this point and turned away to leave. Like an idiot, Jason cracked the door open, revealing another storage room. That's not all that was in there, though. In the corner of the room, there was a human figure sitting on the ground with its legs crossed, facing away from us. We were frozen in place, utterly terrified. After a full minute of stagnance, the person in the corner of the room banged their head against the wall, explaining the sounds we had been hearing. I began tiptoeing to the ladder, careful not to make any noise. The rest of my friends turned around and began doing the same, clearly filled with terror. Just then, Rowan tripped on a piece of junk on the floor and then cursed. The person in the room yelled and we ran. Jason and I were up the ladder in a split second, with Anish close behind. Chip was leaned over the hatch, concerned with what he was hearing. Anish made it up and the three of us ran out of the room. We heard Rowan scream, "Get off me!" but Anish and Jason were too terrified to turn back. I ran back into the room and saw Chip chucking a metal pipe down the hatch, which was followed by a demonic scream. Rowan scrambled on the ladder and Chip grabbed his wrist, yanking him up. Rowan ran toward me while Chip slammed the hatch shut. The five of us sprinted out of the bowling alley, and Rowan hastily locked the door with trembling hands. Jason drove us back with a blank look on his face. We listened as Rowan described what happened after the rest of us made it up the ladder. Apparently, whoever had been in the basement jumped on Rowan's back, clawing at him. Chip came to his rescue and nailed Rowan's attacker in the head with that pipe, causing the lunatic to fall backward. Rowan said he only saw the guy's face for a split second. It was the horrifying face of a dirty, old, homeless-looking guy with a bird's nest of hair on his head. Rowan ended up quitting the next day without giving his boss an explanation, as it was definitely illegal what we had done. To this day, we have no idea how that guy could have gotten down there. Maybe there was an alternate entrance we had overlooked. Either way, the basement had been intentionally hidden, which tells me that Rowan's boss might have known something about the whole thing. This experience ruined my taste for bowling, which I have not done since. One night, my girlfriend Rebecca and I decided it would be fun to go bowling. We drove to the closest bowling alley and went through the whole process of renting shoes, finding balls, and picking a lane. We both were really bad. Neither of us had been bowling in many years. We paid for an hour of bowling. Rebecca wasn't really enjoying it too much because she kept getting gutter balls. I was doing better than her, but not by much, so I wasn't really able to help her out much. And then to make matters even worse, Rebecca's ex-boyfriend arrived with his group of friends and they started bowling a few lanes down from us. Rebecca looked away, refusing to even look in that direction, whispering at me that we need to leave now. We packed it up early and left. She went to the car and waited while I returned the shoes. I think her ex spotted me while I was at the front counter, and I looked away. I didn't tell Rebecca this though. We went home and agreed to play Wii bowling instead and have some wine. That sounded much more fun anyway. When we got home, the first thing I did was turn on the Wii and open a bottle of wine. The bowling alley trip was a failure, but I didn't want Rebecca to be unhappy. We played Wii bowling for like half an hour with music on in the background and drinking wine. It turned out to be much more fun than the bowling alley. Until the current song that was playing ended, and we heard something come from upstairs in that brief moment of silence. Rebecca and I looked at each other, telling me she heard it too. I turned off the music for good, but now there was just silence. The sound we heard could best be described as a heavy object being dropped on the floor. I went upstairs to investigate. I checked every bedroom with the lights on. I checked under every bed. I was relieved to find nothing. I wasn't actually expecting to find someone in the house, but naturally you do need to go investigate if you hear a suspicious sound in your house. Still, I wondered what actually made the sound because I didn't find anything on the floor. After maybe another half an hour of playing Wii bowling, We brought our little wine party upstairs to the bedroom, and eventually we fell asleep. Rebecca's a lightweight, so she got much drunker than me, which explains why I was the one to wake up in the middle of the night and not her. I heard what woke me up though. It was another clear and distinct sound of something heavy being dropped from above. But the only thing is, now we were upstairs, and yet the sound still came from above. So what else would be above us? The attic. The attic door is right outside my bedroom door. It's one of those doors with a string that you pull down and a metal ladder comes down. I tiptoed out of the bedroom to not wake up Rebecca. I stood under the attic door and listened. Every 5 seconds or so, I heard the slightest creaking sound, like from the weight of something moving around. I didn't want to scare Rebecca, but I'd heard of animals getting into people's attics sometimes. I went to get a broom from the closet to use as a possible weapon if I were to have to fend off an animal. Then I quietly pulled the attic door open and climbed up. I stopped at the top of the ladder in the darkness and listened. I heard creaking. It was the creaking of the wooden rocking chair we had up there. I used my phone as a light to reveal the rocking chair. There was someone sitting in it, slowly rocking. I nearly fell off the ladder. I wanted to go run back to Rebecca and hide. I wanted to do anything but approach this person. But I gathered the courage to yell, "Who are you?" The rocking stopped, and the man turned around to look at me. He started making this animalistic, gargling, growling sound. Then he got up, and that's when I hurried down the ladder and pushed the attic door up. I screamed for Rebecca to call the cops until I heard her acknowledge me. I stayed under the attic door, preventing it from being opened as the man in the attic tried kicking the door open. He eventually stopped, and I heard the deranged laughter of a sick, mentally ill person. He spoke in another language. It sounded Russian. I felt like my arms were going to fall off, holding up the attic door, waiting for the police. When they finally arrived, Rebecca went downstairs to let them in. From here, it was the job of the police officers to go up there and remove the man. Rebecca and I waited in the living room, sitting on the couch next to each other, until we saw them bringing the man out through the living room to the front door in handcuffs. The way the man looked at me said everything. He was a dangerous, mentally ill person. His stare was full of hatred and craziness, with a hint of confusion. His lip contorted in this bizarre way that would almost make you think he were drunk. Whatever happened with him, we don't know. We didn't press civil charges, but I'm sure he was charged criminally if they didn't deem him to be insane. This happened in the summertime when we keep the windows open, and so it was most likely that he squeezed through one of the windows in the backyard. I'm not sure why he picked our house. We may just have been the unlucky house he stumbled across. This is a very delicate personal story of mine, so I'm going to change names and small details around so nobody may recognize it to be me. I'd been good friends with a girl named Jess for almost 6 years, since high school basically. We even went to college together and dormed together. When we were in our junior year of college, we moved out of the dorms and into an off-campus apartment. It was a 3-bedroom apartment, and our third roommate was our friend Stacy. We were less close with Stacy, but we had no problems with her. In fact, the three of us would go out together on the weekends. I just had more of that best friend tell everything vibe with Jess, if you know what I mean. It was the spring semester, spring break was approaching, and we were planning the days we'd be going home. Stacy and I were planning on leaving the same day. Jess was going to be staying an extra day because she said she needed to work one final shift at her job. So the day came that Stacy and I left. I said bye to Jess, even though I would probably be seeing her the next day at home. I left and hit the road. But you ever forget something, and when you remember it, it hits you like a brick? That was what happened to me while on the freeway. I pulled to the side of the road in a hurry and checked my bags for my laptop. I checked my backpack too. I realized I had forgotten it. I had driven half an hour already, and now I had to go back just to get my laptop. As much as I didn't want to, I had to. I couldn't go almost 2 weeks without my computer. So my half-hour drive back to the apartment began. When I got back, I let myself in and called for Jess, ready to tell her what an idiot I was. She didn't call back, so she didn't appear to be in the apartment. Her door was wide open though. She usually kept it shut. especially when she wasn't home. I checked my room for my laptop up and down, but I couldn't find it. Curiously, I walked to Jess's doorway and looked into her room, and there it was. My laptop was open on her bed, next to her laptop. Why didn't she call or text me? I went to pick it up and saw my laptop was signed in. She somehow got into my account. That meant she knew my password. I switched to looking at her laptop, and it got worse from here. There was a folder open, containing a bunch of pictures. Pictures of me. Some of the most disturbing pictures I found were pictures of me passed out on the couch after drunk nights out, and pictures of me in a towel, either in my room or in the bathroom. My heart was racing. I shut my laptop and started searching her room, her closet specifically, and I found a number of my belongings, mostly articles of clothing. Some I won't mention because it's disturbing and embarrassing. I grabbed all my stuff I could find and stormed out. I locked my bedroom door and left the apartment. I didn't call Jess. I called my parents as soon as I got back in my car. They didn't have any words. They couldn't even give me advice because this was so messed up. By the time I got home, I saw Jess blocked me on everything. Instagram, Snap. I assumed she blocked my number too, but I never tried contacting her again. By the time I got back to the apartment a week and a half later, all of her stuff was out of the apartment. I didn't see her again for almost a whole year, until she was out with our mutual friends and we ran into each other. She wouldn't even look at me. She couldn't even gather the courage to confront me about it. The person that I thought was my best friend for 6 years was a sick, twisted stalker storing lewd pictures of me and stealing my belongings. This brought to light an incident that happened our first month in the apartment. I was drunk after a night of drinking, and I woke up shortly after falling asleep to a sound in my closet. I remembered sitting up, rubbing my eyes and looking around the room, thinking I saw and heard someone in the closet. I was so scared that I ran to Stacy's room screaming because her room was closer. By the time she went to check the room with me, the closet was empty, and Jess allegedly never woke up to come check the commotion. It made sense to me now that she was in my closet that night. I get sick to my stomach thinking about all the things that she may have done that I will never know about. My old best friend Jason had a number of disorders. Well, I guess if you'd call them that. He had insomnia, he frequently had night terrors, and he battles depression. I'm sure he's got other personal issues that he doesn't really share. All I know is he takes a lot of medication. One day, he and his roommate were having serious issues, worse than usual. Jason called me all distressed, saying they just got into a screaming match with one another, and it almost got physical, and that he needed a place to crash for a couple nights. I told him not a problem. He could sleep on the couch in my apartment for a few nights. When he arrived, I tried pressing him for more details on the fight, like why it happened, but he didn't tell me anything. I respected that though. If he didn't want to share personal details like that, I wasn't going to press him further for it. He dropped his backpack full of clothes in the corner of the living room, and he kind of just watched TV and played Call of Duty on my Xbox for most of the day and night. I hung out with him for a bit, but I had my own things to take care of. When I got home, Jason was passed out on the couch under a blanket. I passed him quietly and got ready for bed. I woke up randomly, feeling extremely thirsty, and the water bottle I kept next to my bed was empty. So I quietly went through the living room towards the kitchen. As I passed by the couch, I couldn't help but notice Jason wasn't on it. His bag was still in the corner of the room though, so it's not like he left. Maybe he ran to the bathroom. Either way, I didn't look around for him. I went back to my room and kept the door open a crack. It was a long time that I didn't hear Jason leaving the bathroom though, or simply laying back down on the couch for that matter. So I was going to get back up and look around for him just because I was concerned. But as I got up, I started hearing these ticking or clicking sounds, kind of like a rodent. I looked around the dark room, and only then did I notice Jason standing in the corner of my room, arms flat at his sides. I let out a scream and jumped, startled as putting how I felt mildly. Yes, even in this dark room, I was able to realize it was Jason. I threw my pillow at him and yelled, "What the actual hell are you doing?" He flinched and he stopped making the ticking noises, then walked out of my room in this stiff, creepy manner. I heard him basically collapse onto the couch. I stepped out into the living room to try to talk to him. He didn't answer. I realized he must have been sleepwalking. The next morning I asked him about it, and he said he didn't remember any of it. I asked him if he tends to sleepwalk. He said no, or at least not that he was aware of. But other than that, the day was pretty normal. We chatted and hung out in the living room for a while. Then I had to go out and run some errands. He'd be staying one more night at my place. I once again woke up randomly in the middle of the night. This time I wasn't thirsty, so I don't know what woke me up. But for curiosity's sake, I got up to check if Jason was on the couch. He wasn't. Not again. I called Jason's name pretty loud. He wasn't in the bathroom or the kitchen, nor did he seem to be in my room. I climbed back into bed and tried texting his phone, but nothing delivered, so it seemed to be off. I called his name one more time, really loud, and then I heard this disturbing, muffled speaking sound. I looked at the closet where it was coming from, and I saw through the 6-inch opening, Jason's face in the dark, peeking through the door, his hands over his mouth. I yelled at him full volume to get him out of my closet. He didn't listen. He had to be sleepwalking again. I went to the closet to open it fully. I grabbed his arm and pulled it to get him out of the closet. But as I did that, I saw the big carving knife in his hand. I looked at his half-lifeless looking face and ran to the bathroom and locked myself in. I considered calling the police, but I didn't. I waited until I heard him go back to the couch. Then I ran to my room and locked the door. I didn't understand how sleepwalking could escalate to a level that he'd be picking up weapons. It didn't seem right. Laying in my bed at 3 in the morning, I DM'd his roommate telling him what just happened and asking him what happened between the two of them. He didn't reply until the next morning. I woke up to 3 long DMs from his roommate. Basically, in short, he told me Jason is a sicko freak who needs help, and he said Jason came into his room with a knife the last night he was there and was standing at the foot of his bed before he tackled him to the floor. He said Jason claimed it was sleepwalking, but his roommate didn't believe it. This made the whole thing even scarier because Jason told me that he doesn't sleepwalk, or not that he's aware of. I asked Jason to leave that day because of what was going on. He did so. I think he went back to his mom's house. Jason and I still follow each other on social media, but I kind of faded things out from him after that. I still don't know what to make of him or the fact that he brought a knife into more than one person's room in the middle of the night. This is a deeply personal and disturbing story. I'm not sure why I'm choosing to share it with the internet, but here goes. I don't have too many friends. Up until a few days ago, I looked at this guy Milo as my best friend for a while. I met him in one of my college classes. We got along mostly because we always cheated on tests together and helped each other to find the answers for our homework assignments. Eventually, we started hanging out outside of class, and I would sooner or later start telling him a lot of personal stuff that I didn't tell many other people. Just because I felt most comfortable with him didn't mean I saw him as this super high quality, genuine guy. He was just someone I thought was somewhat there for me. There was this one night I didn't have plans, so I hit him up and he suggested we hit one of the bars in town. I drove the two of us there since I wasn't planning on getting too drunk. This night though, he for whatever reason decided to get blackout wasted, ordering shot after shot, mixed drink after mixed drink. I had a couple drinks and cut myself off so I could drive. Milo was so drunk that he was approaching random girls and saying some pretty foolish things that were causing me to cringe. At one point I had to apologize to these two girls for him and tried to make light of it. But really, the night just wasn't going the way I wanted it to, which was to have a chill, laid-back night out with my friend. He made it stressful, so I pulled him out of the bar and sat him in my car to drive us back to his apartment. I'd never actually been inside of his apartment before. This was the first time. I walked him inside and laid him down on his couch, where he instantly seemed to just crash and pass out. He dropped his phone out of his hand and onto the floor, but didn't flinch. So yeah, he was out. His phone was on and unlocked though. Honestly, I always wondered what the hell Milo even did for work, considering he always seemed to be down to spend money, but never talked about work. In a perfect world, I shouldn't have done this, but I picked up his phone and started going through his camera roll. I don't know what I was expecting to find, honestly. I was really just being a sneaky snoop, but I was doing it because I often thought Milo was a little sketchy and was hiding some things. His camera roll is full of junk, like screenshots of websites, texts, and a bunch of selfies. So I went to the album section and found this suspicious album titled Girls. I opened it expecting to find nudes or porn pictures or whatever, but no, it was much worse. What I found in there were pictures of young women tied up to a bed In a lot of the pictures, the women were visibly distressed and crying. I won't get into any graphic detail, but the pictures were disturbing. I thought maybe they were from the internet at first, but I took note of the blue bed cover. I went to Milo's room and flicked on the light. When I saw the blue bed cover, I shook my head in disgust, and I guess because I actually had no idea how to feel. I sent a couple of the pictures to myself, then deleted the texts off his phone. I put the phone back on the floor next to him and left. The next day he texted me, "I know you went in my room. We need to talk now." He followed that up with, "If you saw any pictures, they were just role-playing pictures." I ignored him. I didn't know how he knew I saw the pictures though, and I don't know how he knew I was in his room. That next night he came to my door and rang the bell like 30 times. I ignored it. And hours later, when I was trying to sleep, rocks were thrown at my window, and I heard Milo outside calling up to me. Moments later, I heard him trying to open one of my windows. That's when I picked up my phone and called him, and yelled at him to simply leave me alone or I would be calling the cops. Then I hung up. He didn't text me or call me again. I still have those 2 pictures on my phone, and I'm really wondering what I should do and how I should proceed with it. If he really knows I saw those pictures, I don't know if he's going to target me if he gets the chance, or if he's going to move out or what, but at this very moment, I'm a little scared for my well-being. This happened to me back in late November of 2024 when I was 18. I was at the Walden Galleria Mall in Buffalo, just doing some early Christmas shopping for my family. I like to get my Christmas shopping over with. I also like going to the mall during Christmas time because of the decorations and general vibe. Something about shopping when that Christmas feeling is in the air makes it more enjoyable to me. I had like 3 bags with me already. I stopped in Victoria's Secret, Zara, and Sephora. I got my brother and dad something from Zara, and my sister and mom stuff from Sephora. I also got myself a bunch of stuff. I'd already been in the mall for hours, and I wanted to just sit and collect myself. I sat on one of the benches not far from the tall tree that the mall puts up every year. There were still people in the mall, but it was closing soon, so there were less and less with each passing minute. A man came and sat down next to me. He cracked a joke at first, which I laughed at. He seemed like this innocent older guy, like 62 or something. He reminded me, honestly, of a skinny Santa Claus, ironically. We talked for a couple of minutes. The things he said that mainly stuck out to me were him talking about how he'd been coming to this mall since it opened, and how he was scared it was going to shut down. He said I looked like his daughter, and then showed me a picture of her on his phone. I didn't see a resemblance at all, to be honest. In fact, the girl looked absolutely nothing like me, or him for that matter. It was also a picture of a girl who looked like she was 18. He looked like he could have been her grandfather, honestly. Eventually, I felt it was time to leave, so I slightly awkwardly got up and said goodbye and walked away. I didn't look back to see if he was watching me. I like to avoid awkwardness in every way. I got to my car and started my drive home. I live only about 10 minutes from the mall. My family has several homes, and it's often that I'm alone with just my brother in this house. This was one of those spans of time. This night was a Thursday, I believe. My brother goes to University of Buffalo and often goes out Thursday nights. This night was no exception. Our house is in a cul-de-sac with 2 other big houses, and when I turned right into the cul-de-sac, I looped around to our house. This cul-de-sac is unusual. It isn't one big open court. It has a circular patch of grass with some trees in the middle, so it more so resembles a roundabout. Around this time, right before pulling into the driveway, I got a message on my phone. It said, "AirTag found moving with you." I panicked, but instead of pulling into the driveway, I looped around and drove back down the street, just in case I was being tracked. I had to make sure this AirTag was actually in or on my car. I figured out how to make the AirTag make a noise, and partially expecting it to come from the outside of the car, I heard a beeping sound coming from one of my shopping bags. I dug through the bag and pulled out an AirTag, actually feeling like throwing up. I put the car back in drive and drove further down the block where I chucked the AirTag out the window. Then I turned around and floored it back to the house. I drove into the driveway and ran inside where I opened the garage, hoping to hide the car in there, but my mom's car was in there. I had no choice but to leave the car outside. I closed the garage door and locked the front door. I called my brother Cody for safe measures, just letting him know what happened. He said if anyone comes to the house, call him. Him saying that alone scared me, especially hearing in his tone that he wasn't kidding, but he also sounded kinda drunk. I went to the living room and tried to just take my mind off of it, but I wouldn't have written this if that's where it ended. The sound of the doorbell made me sick immediately. It was like in the back of my mind I was dreading it, and it happened. Followed by the doorbell was 3 loud, distinct knocks. I slowly walked over to the door, like tiptoeing, and I stopped when a slightly muffled man's voice on the other side said, "Hey Ashley, I think you might have my AirTag." And it all hit me instantly. It was that man from the mall. He probably purposely threw his AirTag into my Sephora bag to stalk me home. He saw me through the textured glass. When I guess he saw me hurrying away, I heard him yell that he promises he dropped the AirTag in there by accident. I didn't listen to a word he said. Even if he was telling the truth, the AirTag wasn't in my house and he'd have seen that. It meant he saw me go to the house and that's all he wanted. I called Cody again, and at first he thought I was joking, but when he heard I was serious, he said he was on his way home. The downtown bars are not far away, so I'd only have to wait maybe 10 minutes. When I peeked back at the door, I could no longer see the man through the glass. Maybe he was gone, I thought. I went to the living room and turned on the TV to drown out the silence. I was trying not to think about the man at the door. I just waited for Cody, and out of the corner of my eye, I saw movement. I looked over, but now I didn't see anything. I sat there trying to convince myself it was nothing. Maybe the man left. Somehow, I did briefly convince myself of that, but after a minute or two of watching TV, I heard the same voice from outside that window say, "I love it when they play dumb." I looked, and he was standing right outside the window, his face pressed against the glass. He smiled when he saw me notice him. It was that old man from the mall. He lifted his hand and tapped on the window, then said, "Don't pretend you don't know I'm watching you." I called Cody and yelled into the phone that the man was at the window. He said he was almost home and told me to call 911, so I hung up and did just that. The man just kept standing there watching me, smiling like this was a game, and I couldn't take it anymore, so I left the living room to the office where there were no windows. A few minutes later, I heard Cody pull into the driveway. Cody ran inside, but when we looked back at the window, the man was gone. The cop who arrived searched but found no footprints or anything. The cop was not very familiar with the process for reporting an AirTag, but he gave me a police report number to use, and he suggested contacting Apple to start the process of tracking the owner. The next day, I tried that, but it turned out it would be a much more involved legal process than I was expecting. When I simply didn't hear or see anything else for a couple of weeks, I just lost interest. Maybe the man saw my brother and cops arrive, so he bailed and didn't come back. But to be honest, I have thought back on this, and on the girl's pictures on his phone. And I hope to God that wasn't another girl who he potentially kidnapped or worse. I truly hope that was just a random girl's picture he took off social media or something. This experience changed me for the worse. I'm not the same person I was before it all happened, and I fear I never will be again. My name is Claire. This didn't happen so long ago that I've forgotten about it, but it's not like it happened last week either. I no longer live where this story took place, so that's why I feel comfortable talking about it now. I had just moved to a new city for a promotion at work. It wasn't anything too exciting, just your standard mid-sized city. It was a Tuesday evening when the first strange thing happened. I was driving home from work, which, mind you, is just a short 15-minute commute, and I was listening to a podcast when my phone buzzed. It was a notification I had never seen before. AirTag found moving with you. At first I thought it was a mistake. Maybe someone had dropped their keys in the parking lot, or maybe it was just one of my friends playing a prank. But as soon as I opened the notification, I was horrified. The app said the AirTag had been moving with me for over an hour. That meant it had been in my car the entire commute, or worse, in the parking lot before I even got in. I checked the back seat, under the seats, in the glove compartment, and even in the trunk, but there was nothing. No AirTag, and beyond that, there was nothing unfamiliar or out of place either. I instantly knew what was going on. Someone had placed an AirTag in my car, and whoever it was knew where I went. Worse, they knew where I was. I tried to stay calm, but it was hard. Unable to find the AirTag, I had no choice but to drive home, meaning I'd be leading a potential stalker directly to my apartment, but I had no other option. Once I got home, I checked my car again, this time more thoroughly. I still couldn't find it though, despite my phone insisting it was there. The logical part of me wanted to call the police, but I hesitated. What could they do? There was no device to show them, and even if there was no direct evidence of who had placed it. I calmed myself down with some reassuring facts. My apartment had decent security, so it wasn't the end of the world if someone knew where I lived, and it wasn't like I could undrive home. Whoever the AirTag belonged to already knew my location, which no police or anyone else could change, so I tried to ignore it. The next morning, I drove to work as usual. The notification popped up again when I got to work, but I ignored it. Despite my efforts, I didn't get much done that day. I couldn't stop thinking about the stupid AirTag. When I got home that evening, I decided I had to find the thing. I spent probably an hour going through my car checking every possible hiding spot, even though I had already checked most of them the day before. Right when I was about to give up again, I ran my hand along the crack where the back seat meets the back and my fingers hit something solid. I already knew what it was. I took the thing inside, trying to ignore how violently my hands were shaking. I ended up just taking the battery out of it because I didn't know what else to do. I didn't want to destroy it because it could have been used as evidence, but I didn't like the thought of it still being active. The thought that someone had been watching my every move for days, maybe weeks, made me feel exposed in a way that I had never felt before. That night, while I was trying to sleep, I kept thinking about who could have planted that thing in the first place. There were a fair share of guys in my life, ex-boyfriends, friends of friends, flings, but no one who would have done something so messed up. The next evening, I came home late from work after a pretty awful day. I went to unlock my apartment door, something I had done 100 times, and I froze. My apartment door was already wide open. I live alone. No one, not my parents, not any of my friends, should have been inside. I didn't go inside. That would have been a terrible decision. Instead, I went straight back to my car and called the police. They checked the apartment thoroughly. There was no definitive evidence of anyone ever being there. No fingerprints, no forced entry, nothing to indicate someone had actually been inside. I ended up showing them the AirTag notifications and told them everything that had been happening the past few days. The police kept asking me if I had a history of being stalked, or if I knew anyone who would do such a thing, but I didn't. The whole thing was such a nightmare. Things did die down slightly after that. My stalker had probably gotten wind of the police visit, but I ended up moving out anyway. Luckily, I don't think that person followed or tracked me to my new place, but it still gets at me that someone in my life stalked and broke into my apartment. The worst part though, the thing that makes this all so scary, is that I still have no idea how they broke into my apartment in the first place. The door wasn't damaged or broken into. It was simply unlocked with a key that no one else should have had. This happened a few years ago, and I want to remain as anonymous as possible while telling this story for reasons you'll soon understand. I'm from an upper middle class suburb, but that's as much information as I'm comfortable giving. The nightmare I'm about to tell you about took place over several months and led to a slew of legal issues that, at times, made me genuinely question whether my life was going to be ruined. In other words, it wasn't just stressful and scary, but truly overwhelming on a level that's difficult to capture. I don't mean that as a joke or a figure of speech. There were days where I spent hours staring at the ceiling while considering some very dark things. This all started a couple weeks after I broke up with my first serious girlfriend after college. Let's just call her Devin. I'm not going to get into it. I refuse to do that to myself. But let's just say we did not end on good terms. Despite that, I wasn't too beat up about breaking things off. She was psychotic, and I was kind of relieved to let it go. I have this friend named Zenon. Weird name, I know, but his parents have always been very wealthy, eccentric, and completely out of touch with reality. He throws parties pretty frequently at this huge property he inherited from them, which is something I still don't really understand since it's not like they passed away or anything. But that's his world, not mine. I was at one of these parties where I ran into one of my ex's friends, who I'll just call Taylor. Seeing her there wasn't the most surprising thing in the world. Most people in our area know Zenon, and basically everyone went to the same high schools and colleges around here. Plus, most of the people who left for college ended up coming back anyway. What was surprising was how aggressively and obviously she was coming on to me. Taylor had always talked shit about me to Devin while we were dating, so I found her behavior extremely strange. But my skepticism didn't last, and I ultimately gave in after a few more beers. And before you jump to call me stupid, if you knew what Taylor looked like, you wouldn't blame me. The two of us ended up hooking up in one of the upstairs bedrooms. I must have been significantly more dazed than she was, because I hadn't even started getting dressed before she was already halfway out the room. As I was leaving the room myself, I realized my wallet was no longer in my pants pocket. Taylor had disappeared at that point, probably to go flirt with some other guy in the crowd, but I tried to find her anyway. After maybe 20 minutes of searching, I gave up. I ran back upstairs to the room we'd been in and searched everywhere, but my wallet was nowhere to be found. My next instinct was to call her, but it took me all of 10 seconds to remember that I was still blocked from when Devin and I had broken up. And since there was no way I'd be unblocking Devin, you couldn't pay me to do that, I had no way of getting in contact with Taylor. Losing my wallet didn't bother me all that much though. It was probably just the alcohol, but I decided to ignore the problem for the rest of the night, enjoy the party, and honestly relish in the fact that I'd gotten one over on my ex by hooking up with her friend. I don't remember much after that. I'm pretty sure one of my buddies ended up driving me home. The second I woke up the next morning, I instantly remembered the AirTag I kept in my wallet for situations exactly like the one from the night before. I pulled up my iPhone and saw that it was active. It was Saturday, meaning I didn't have to work, so I decided to ignore my brutal hangover and track my wallet down. The location was showing up at one of the local gyms, so I figured I'd drive over there and confront Taylor for stealing it, or determine if she had taken it by accident. Or hell, if someone else entirely had found it. As soon as I stepped out of my car and started walking toward the gym entrance, the AirTag went offline, which I found strange, borderline impossible timing. The receptionist at the front desk refused to let me look around without a membership, which frustrated me more than it should have. So instead, I walked the perimeter of the building like some kind of weirdo, looking through the glass to see if I could spot Taylor inside. But I didn't see her anywhere. In fact, I didn't see anyone I recognized at all. Not Devin, not any of my friends, not some random person from Zenon's party, no one. The AirTag was still offline, so I had no choice but to just go home and bury my frustrations in whatever work I needed to get done before Monday. All my cards were already canceled at that point, so I couldn't imagine what use someone would have for an empty wallet. I kept checking its location periodically throughout the rest of the day, but it didn't come back online. Not until the next day around noon, when I saw that it was once again online, this time at some random park nearby. So I again rushed to my car and drove out to its location, determined to get to the bottom of what was going on. But the exact same thing happened. As soon as I exited my car, the AirTag went offline. It was like someone was doing it deliberately to mess with me. There were a handful of people in the park, but again, no one I recognized. I was a bit more desperate this time around, so I actually started jogging around the park a little, but to no avail. As I was getting back to my car, I felt this sick feeling start bubbling up. Like I was being watched. Worse, like I was being observed. How could someone disable an AirTag the moment I showed up? They must have been watching me. It was a really uncomfortable thought, but there was nothing I could do about it. Looking back, that was the first time I suspected something sinister might have been going on. After I got home, I did some research and found out that whoever had my wallet was probably removing and replacing the AirTag battery to take it on and offline. It was infuriating to think that someone, probably Taylor, was toying with me like this. I had work the next day, so it wasn't like I could devote much energy to the situation. But for the next few days, the AirTag stayed offline. I decided to give up on the whole thing, refusing to give Taylor the satisfaction of watching me wander around like a lost puppy. But of course, the moment I started getting on with my life, everything hit the fan again. Only what happened next was about 1,000 times worse. I was lying in bed, trying to fall asleep, when the sound of shattering glass jolted me awake. It had been so long, literally years, since I had experienced true terror, that I can only describe it as suffocation. I physically couldn't breathe for about 15 seconds. It felt like someone was choking me. After finally snapping out of my haze, I called 911 and told them what was going on. Then I locked my bedroom door and listened as the person below me started tearing through the place. I wanted to go down there and confront them. I did, I swear. But I didn't have access to a weapon, and I wasn't about to lose my life over some personal belongings. So I waited. But from the sound of it, the intruder was gone long before the police arrived. And they were. The police took my statement, and I gave them a catalog of everything that was missing. My laptop, my monitor, some miscellaneous electronics, and a few other things. You might be wondering why I didn't connect the break-in to the AirTag situation, which is a fair point. And I did think about it, but I ultimately figured that would have been unnecessarily dramatic and paranoid. Fast forward a few weeks. I still checked the location of that AirTag from time to time, just out of curiosity, but every time I did, it was offline. That is, until one random time it wasn't. It was showing up at a decently popular bar that I'd been to a handful of times. Despite having promised myself that I wouldn't be suckered into someone else's game again, I couldn't resist. What happened when I got there really shouldn't surprise you. As soon as I was in spitting distance of the bar, this time with a hoodie on trying to be inconspicuous, the AirTag went offline. But this time I couldn't just swallow my rage and frustration. I actually started going up to random people in the line and accusing them of having taken my wallet. It was bad. I was just approaching people at random, and even though I knew I was causing a scene, I couldn't stop. Everyone was staring at me, and that just made my outburst that much worse. It got so bad to the point where one of the bouncers had to come over and physically kick me off the premises. It was one of the most embarrassing and infuriating moments of my life. I got played just one more time after that, this time at a random coffee shop in the middle of the day, before I swore to never check the AirTag's location again, this time for real. But just over a week later, my life damn near ended. This is where excess detail becomes really risky, but please know that what I said earlier is 100% true. What happened next caused irreparable damage to my mental health and put me in a very dark place. I was getting ready for work one day when there was a knock at my door. It was the police, and they had an arrest warrant with my name on it for suspicion of stalking, along with a search warrant for my house. Specifically, they were looking for a journal that was supposedly hidden in one of my dresser drawers. I had no idea what was going on. I told them there was no journal in my room, but they weren't asking for my permission. That was what the warrant was for. Still, I insisted that there was no journal anywhere in my room, but they found one anyway. I didn't see them find it. I was already in the back of a police car in handcuffs by then. The next few months of my life were an absolute nightmare. Apparently, Devin had been crafting a case against me without my knowledge for over a month. She had produced what seemed like an overwhelming amount of evidence that I'd been stalking her during that entire period of time, even though in reality, I hadn't seen or communicated with her even once. There were pictures of me that she claimed to have taken at the gym, that one park, and the other locations. Locations that I'd been lured to by the AirTag. It was her the whole time. She had text messages that supposedly proved she was at those locations when those photos were taken, even though I knew for a fact that she hadn't been at any of them. But it gets worse. She had a series of text messages that had apparently been sent from my phone to hers over the course of several weeks. Really disturbing, harassing messages. Stuff an actual stalker would say, which is basically what I was at that point. In the messages, Devin would plead and beg quote-unquote me to stop contacting her, saying my actions were damaging her mental state. She's bipolar and takes medication for it, and she was saying that what I was doing was causing her to live in constant fear and anxiety. She even claimed that the stress from my harassment made her crash her car, among some other things I don't want to repeat. No one believed my story. I had no proof of anything, and she had it all. The journal was the most damning piece of evidence. It supposedly contained pages upon pages of me detailing Devin's daily schedule and having these psychotic conversations with myself about all the sick, nasty things I was going to do to her. Reading it made me feel sick. Not just because it was so disturbing, but because I didn't write a single bit of it. No lawyer could help me. Her evidence was too overwhelming, and I couldn't prove any of it was fabricated. At one point, I was being advised to plead guilty. Guilty to a slew of crimes I didn't commit and would never think about committing. It was utterly disgusting. It made me feel like a disgusting human being. What ended up saving me was something completely out of my control. This guy Devin was sleeping with, I won't even bother naming him, called the police and confessed his role to the whole scheme. He told them that Devin had given him my AirTag, which she'd gotten from Taylor after Zenin's party. According to him, Devin had instructed him to lure me to different locations, remove the battery when he spotted me, and take inconspicuous pictures of me from a distance. He agreed to it because he thought it was some kind of funny joke at first, but text messages between him and Devin revealed that he started having second thoughts when she began talking about planting evidence in my house. The texts also showed exactly how she'd done that too. She apparently had made a copy of my house keys without my knowledge while we were still dating. Things went pretty quickly after that. Under pressure to now tell the truth, Devin ended up admitting to everything, including breaking into my house herself. She'd stolen my laptop because she knew my password, another thing I had no idea about, and she planned to use it to send those harassing messages to herself. Her logic was that she could later claim that I'd sent them from my phone and then deleted them, and that my laptop had been stolen so it couldn't be used as evidence against her story. She said breaking in and making it look like a random robbery was safer than constantly sneaking into my house over several weeks to send messages and delete them. Everything was eventually dismissed and justice was served, but I don't think I'll ever recover from what happened. I bet this story is already pretty long, but I could write pages and pages more about it. I haven't even given you the specifics of the aftermath, the way my family and friends alienated me, or even the painful process of keeping my name off the internet. I haven't given you my theories about why my ex would go to those lengths in the first place, or the kinds of stunts she used to pull while we were dating. I don't know if I'll ever feel comfortable dating someone again. That's the worst part of it. The idea that someone could manipulate technology and the legal system to effectively destroy my life, and almost get away with it, is something that will forever terrify me. If that guy hadn't developed a conscience, my life might actually have been ruined. When my friend Dom turned 21, he organized a group trip to Vegas among our closest friends. We stayed at the Gold Coast Hotel and Casino, which was a 5-minute walk from the Strip. There were 6 of us, too many names to list, so I'll just name them as I go. But we had 3 rooms, and 2 to each room. I was rooming with Joey. Our flight landed around 5, so by the time we were unpacked and settled in the hotel, it was around 7. We stopped at In-N-Out for dinner since we're all from the East Coast, and the novelty of In-N-Out was pretty appealing. Right after that, we walked around until ending up at the Bellagio Hotel's casino. It was absolutely massive. We all kind of split off into little groups. Joey and I were just doing slot machines, while 3 of the others were at blackjack tables. I'm not sure where the 6th went. But when I say Joey and I were doing the slot machines, I mean we were really just sitting there occasionally spinning the slot machine every few minutes. Really just collecting those free shots that the cocktail waitresses would walk around with to try and get the patrons drunker and looser with their money. Let's just say we were trying not to blow $1,000 on the first night. After a few shots, we went over to our friends by the blackjack tables to watch them. I'd say after an hour at the casino watching our friends gamble their money away, we all left with intentions of walking to this place called Lily Bar and Lounge. But halfway to the bar, I did a quick pat-down of all my pockets, making sure I had my phone and wallet. Then I had that mini heart attack when I felt an empty pocket where my wallet should have been. I started to freak out, asking my friends if they remember when I had it last. None of them remembered. I asked them to wait for me, while I ran back to the Bellagio to check. They didn't want to wait though. Joey just gave me his room card and told me to check our hotel if it wasn't at the Bellagio. Then the 5 of them continued walking to the bar while I ran back to the casino of the Bellagio. I felt very defeated, as I was predicting having lost my wallet on the first night, and I would be absolutely screwed if I wanted to get into any bars or clubs. I retraced all my steps in the casino, including checking the seat of the slot machine we were at. Then I checked Lost and Found, but there was nothing. So next I had to try our hotel room. This was my last shot at finding it, and I felt sick to my stomach about it now. I felt this could ruin my entire trip. I ran through the lobby and up the stairs to the second floor where my room was. I got to the door and tried Joey's key card. The card reader flashed red a few times. I wondered if he had a faulty card. I rubbed the card with my shirt to remove any smudges or whatever that could be hindering the card reader. On the next try, it beeped and lit green, and I opened the door. I started searching the entire room, throwing clothes out of my suitcase and onto the bed, digging through my suitcase, then tearing through the bed sheets even though they weren't even slept in yet. I checked under the beds, pillows, on the table and TV stand, but it was not in there. I collapsed on the bed, literally wanting to cry. Then I thought to maybe call the front desk and ask if it was turned into lost and found, so I did just that. The desk worker picked up on the third or fourth ring, and I asked if they could check the lost and found for my wallet. She said hold on, then put me on hold for a minute. When she came back, she asked what my name was because apparently lots of people lose their wallets in Vegas. I told her my name, then she said something that confused me. She said something along the lines of, "Sir, didn't I speak to you just now at the front desk when you asked me what room number you were in?" I asked when she was referring to, and she said within the past 15 minutes. That wasn't possible because I had been gone for nearly 2 hours. I told the lady I was coming down to the front desk, then I hung up. But it made me wonder, just what if? I checked the one closet in the room, and it was empty. Then I looked at the bathroom. The bathroom door was shut. I grabbed the doorknob, sighed, and yanked it open, expecting to see someone. But no, it appeared empty. I turned on the bathroom light just to look at myself in the mirror, but I almost instantly noticed the shadow through the shower curtain. It was undoubtedly a person in there casting that shadow who looked taller than me. I didn't want to get stabbed or shot that night. I left the hotel room and immediately called the number for the hotel. I asked them to send security up right away. Not even 5 minutes later, 2 large men in security shirts came down the hall and I pointed at the door, yelling there's someone in our bathroom shower who stole my wallet. I opened the door for them, and right center of the hotel room was this 30-something-year-old man with a COVID mask over his mouth. He had his hands in the air. Security guards escorted him out of our room and patted him down for weapons. And not so shockingly, they found my wallet in his pocket. He didn't have any weapons on him though. Security called the police and arrested the man, and I got my wallet back. The man admitted to finding my wallet outside of the hotel, went to the front desk asking what room number I was in, and letting himself in. Even though no one was harmed, I feel like this could have turned out so much worse. For example, if I decided to open that shower curtain. My friends hardly believed my story until security guards backed it up later that night. The rest of the trip went completely normal. A few years back, I stayed with 3 friends in Bally's Hotel in Vegas, once known as the MGM Grand, until November 21st in 1980, when it burned down. The fire began from a refrigerated pastry display case in one of the restaurants located on the first floor, and apparently the fire engulfed the resort's casino, and the smoke traveled into the hotel tower, killing 85 people due to smoke inhalation. We read about this in some of the reviews of the place while booking. But I mean, that was 40 years ago. How would it really affect our stay? The rates for rooms were surprisingly more affordable than some comparable hotels for that specific weekend. Something I didn't pay attention to in the reviews, though, were the number of people who reported witnessing and hearing strange paranormal events. There are even reports of ghostly activity in the casino. The most common complaint I was seeing from guests was the presence of a smell of smoke and burning, especially on the upper floors, even though there was no one smoking. But I wasn't aware of any of this on our first night there. On our second night there, we went to a couple casinos, then got dinner and went back to the room to regroup before heading back out. Not without stopping at a liquor store for some booze beforehand, so we could all loosen up a little more before going out. After we pre-gamed for a good half hour to an hour, we all called an Uber to Omnia nightclub not too far away. By the time we got there, the liquor was definitely kicking in, and this is where my memory starts getting a little fuzzy. I remember we were waiting online for at least half an hour, and I remember my one friend Alec talking to this group of girls in front of us. Next thing that I really remember was standing at the bar inside the club with my friends trying to order drinks, and I vaguely remember bits and pieces of being on the dance floor, but when I say I blacked out besides that, I'm not exaggerating. The night became a little clearer when I left the club, but according to my friends, I left alone. I somehow made my way back to the hotel and back to the room on the 17th floor. From here on out, I remember just about everything. I was sitting on the edge of the bed with my head in my hands for quite a while, feeling like my head was spinning, when I heard what sounded to be a kid coughing on the other side of the door. I pulled myself together and went to check through the peephole, making sure no one was choking or anything, I guess. There was no one visible, so I opened the door. The corridor was empty. At this point, standing up made me feel even sicker, so I went to the bathroom to throw up. After that, I felt better and laid down in the bed to go to sleep. It was 3-something in the morning. None of my friends were back yet. I heard the coughing once again. It sounded like a young boy's coughing. I didn't feel like getting up to check again, though. I resumed trying to fall into a deep sleep, when out of nowhere, this ear-piercing ringing went off, along with a flashing red light in the room. It was the smoke alarm, and in the corner of the room, every time that flashing light blinked, I could see a person standing in the corner of the room. It looked like a young boy facing the door. I looked closer to see if I was seeing things, and on the 4th blink, I started to scream and crawl backwards out of the bed and onto the floor. I don't know what exactly I thought was happening, that I was going to be killed or that I was seeing a ghost, but after a while, as if I were experiencing sleep paralysis or a hallucination, the apparition of the boy in the corner disappeared. I gave myself time to breathe and calm down, and convinced myself I was just seeing things. And just like the boy disappearing, the smoke alarm turned off a minute later. My heart was racing for the next 10 minutes as I sat up in the bed on my phone trying to contact my friends. They got back around 4, and I decided not to tell them for the sake of sounding like a drunk fool. I did more research the next day about the hotel and supernatural sightings, and I was even more disturbed when I read that other people had witnessed and heard a boy coughing on the 17th and 18th floors. Needless to say, I didn't want to stay there anymore. Thank God it was only a 3-night trip. In 2018, my friends and I rented an Airbnb in North Vegas to attend the Electric Daisy Festival, which is an EDM music festival. It was my first experience of this kind. I'm not even a fan of EDM, nor do I do any kind of hard drugs. But I went with my 3 friends who are into this stuff, who I'll call Jess, Marissa, and Nicole. My friend Jess had a drug dealer connection in Vegas who she was planning on buying Molly from. The festival starts pretty late in the day and goes all night, so on the first day we were just driving around Vegas trying to find things to do. At some point, Jess needed to meet up with her friend to buy the Molly, so while we were eating, she went to pick up from him. Afterwards, we went back to the Airbnb to start getting ready for the festival, changing into our outfits. If you know anything about music festivals, girls usually wear the most revealing outfits imaginable. It was new to me. I needed my friends to help me buy an outfit. As we called a lift to the racetrack where the festival was being held, Jess handed us all our own little baggies with the Molly. I was very nervous, as I've never really done any drugs except for weed, if that even counts. The ride there was surprisingly quick. Jess told us the Molly should kick in around 45 minutes after taking it. By then, we were online to get inside. The effects of it didn't really kick in for a while, and my friends all agreed they were already feeling it. So I had a feeling I didn't take enough, and I went for the baggie I smuggled into the festival and took a little more. For the next hour, we danced as the sun went down and the sky got darker, and all the lights from the stages and carnival rides lit up the place. I was realizing the Molly was kicking in hard, and I was starting to trip. It was such a surreal experience with all the lights, booming music, and the euphoric feeling of the drug. But eventually I realized I took way too much. I started to lose track of where I was, and next thing I knew, I was lost in the crowd without my friends. At some point this guy started talking to me, and I must have asked him for help finding my friends, because he told me, "I know where your friends are, I'll take you to them." I followed him through the crowd holding his hand, till we got closer to the back of the crowd. I asked where we were going. He said he knows where Jess is. I thought the fact that he knew my friend's name meant he was telling the truth. Then he asked me to call Jess and he'd talk to her, so I dialed Jess's number and handed him the phone. 5 seconds later, he started talking to her. He was on the phone with her for a minute before hanging up. He said Jess left to the hotel with my other friends because one of them got sick. He said he would take me there. I stood there tripping like an idiot and said okay. He called us an Uber, and when we got inside, he asked for my number. I gave it to him because I was yet to see any red flags in my inebriated state. till I looked at the Uber driver's screen and saw that it said the destination was 15 miles away. And then it hit me. Why did the guys say my friends went to the hotel when we weren't staying at a hotel? We were staying at an Airbnb. I asked the driver where we were going, and I don't remember what he said, but whatever he said made me realize he was not taking us to the Airbnb. I asked the driver to turn me around, but the guy next to me started claiming he was my boyfriend and I was just incredibly drunk and needed to get home. I started to scream that he's not my boyfriend, that I just met him, and eventually the driver believed me and stopped the car, kicking the guy out. I started to cry and asked the driver to bring me back to the festival so I could find my friends, but he informed me the festival doesn't allow re-entry, so he brought me back to the Airbnb. He waited until he saw that I let myself in using the code, and then I started frantically texting and calling all my friends till one of them picked up. They couldn't hear me on the phone at the festival, so I typed in our group chat what happened. Jess came back to the Airbnb to be with me, while Marissa and Nicole stayed till much later at the festival. I somehow slept like a baby that night, but I woke up the next morning to 3 missed calls and a handful of texts from that guy who tried to most likely kidnap me. The text went as follows. "Hey, did you make it back? Where are you? I'll come to you and help you to your Airbnb. Honestly, fuck you for making a scene like that in front of the Uber driver, making me look like some kind of rapist." It goes without saying this guy never knew who any of my friends were, and he never got on the phone with Jess. I most likely told him my friend's name when I asked him for help in finding them. This was my first time doing a hard drug, and it blurred my judgment so much that I almost allowed myself to possibly get kidnapped. My name is Evan. I'm 28 years old. After my divorce, I moved to a small town named Chatham in Alabama. Apart from my parents' house, I didn't really have anywhere else to go, so I came to live in my grandfather's old house. He passed away a few years ago and left the place to us. It's about 10 minutes outside town, sitting on 10 acres surrounded by woods. It's real quiet out there. I thought I'd enjoy that. The house is old, wood floors that creak, doors that stick, the kind of place that always feels a little cold no matter how high the thermostat is. But it was free, and I didn't have a better option. The first few nights were normal. I unpacked and cleaned. I spent the evening sitting on the porch with a beer. It was peaceful. No traffic, just the wind through the trees and the occasional owl. But then the noises started. The first time I heard it was on the 7th night. I had just gotten into bed around midnight. I was almost asleep when I heard whistling outside. It wasn't a song I recognized, just a slow, broken tune, off-key. It sounded like someone walking through the woods behind the house, whistling as they went. It creeped me out, but I figured it was some hunter or drunk neighbor. The next night, it happened again. Same time, same tune, but this time it sounded closer. I got out of bed and turned on the porch light, but I didn't see anyone. I went outside with the flashlight and checked around the yard. Nothing. No tracks, no sounds of someone running off, just the whistling, fading deeper into the woods. I tried to ignore it. For a couple of nights, I just stayed in bed and tried to sleep through it, but every time, the whistling would start around 1:17 a.m. I know that sounds like a random number, but I swear it was always around 1:15 or 1:19, somewhere there. It was like clockwork. I started thinking maybe someone was messing with me on purpose, someone who knew I was out there alone. I called the sheriff's office a few days later. An old deputy, who I'll call Deputy H, came out. He'd been in the job a long time. When I told him what was happening, he got real quiet. He said word for word, "Your granddaddy used to call us about the same thing. Said someone was whistling around the property late at night, always in the spring. We never found anything. I figured he was just getting old, but now you're hearing it too." That shook me. I had no idea my grandfather dealt with this. Deputy H told me to keep the doors locked and stay inside after dark. I started doing that. Not like I wasn't already. I double-checked every window. One night I even put chairs under the doorknobs, but the whistling kept coming. Closer every night. One night I heard it behind the shed. It was louder than usual, like the person was standing right outside. I grabbed my flashlight and looked through the blinds. I didn't see anyone, but I didn't dare go outside. The next night, I heard it from the front porch, right by the door. 3 long whistles, then silence. The night after that, it came from under the floorboards. I swear to God, it was like someone was in the crawl space, whistling up through the vents. I didn't sleep at all that night. I started digging through the attic the next day, trying to find anything my grandfather left behind. I found a box of his journals. He wrote about the whistling. He said it happened every spring for over 10 years. He didn't know who it was, but he thought it was someone watching the house. He said he used to sit up with a rifle by the front door just in case. He said it only ever happened when he lived alone, after my grandmother died. I called Deputy H again. He came by and read the journal, and he looked nervous. He told me to be careful. He said don't open the door if you don't know who it is. That night, I stayed up. I sat on the couch with a shotgun across my lap, a shotgun I barely knew how to load. I waited. At 1:17 a.m., the whistling started again, but this time, it didn't come from outside. It came from the hallway, inside the house. I froze. The hallway light was off. I could hear the whistling moving closer, step by step. I stood up, aimed the shotgun, and shouted, "Who's there?" The whistling stopped. I flipped the hallway light on. Nothing was there. No one. I didn't sleep again after that. It was 2 nights since then, and I hadn't heard it again. I was getting sick. I didn't know who this person was. I didn't know why they picked me or my grandfather, but it was real, and I knew it was. I don't believe in hallucinations to that degree, nor do I believe in anything paranormal. This was a real person. After that night, things went quiet for 2 days. No sounds, no movement, no sign of anything. I thought maybe it was finally over. On the 3rd night, I went to bed just after midnight. I didn't stay up this time. I left the hallway light on just in case. At exactly 1:17 a.m., I woke up to a new sound. Not whistling, knocking. Slow, paced-out knocks. 3 of them. They were coming from inside the house, from the back door. Then silence. I didn't move. I stayed in bed, listening. A minute later, I heard a new sound. A creak from the floorboard in the hallway. Then another. Someone was walking. The hallway light went out. I grabbed my shotgun, heart pounding, and stepped out of the bedroom. The hallway was dark, but at the end of it, I saw something. A person, wearing black clothes, pale face. They were standing perfectly still, just watching me. I raised the shotgun, but my hands were shaking. I tried to speak, but my mouth was dry. I raised the shotgun, but my hands were shaking. I screamed, "Don't move," with my shaky voice. I saw in the dark the person slowly start lifting their leg and turning as if they were about to run. I screamed, "Stop," and at that moment they darted out of the hallway, out of my line of sight. I heard their surprisingly heavy footsteps stomping out the front door into the dark. I ran outside and fired a shot, not into the air, but straight ahead into the darkness, low-key hoping I'd hit him in the dark. I screamed, "Don't come back." The shot hurt my ears, ricocheting off the walls of the house and the deck. I locked up the house, got to my truck, and drove into town. I slept in my truck that night. The next morning, Deputy H drove out there, and the front door to the house was unlocked again. That confirmed whoever that person was had a key to my grandfather's house. Nothing was broken or missing, but Deputy H recommended I change the locks, and he also off the record suggested I move out of that old place, because someone out in those woods hasn't taken kindly to either my grandfather or myself being in that house. I drove out to the local home improvement store and switched the locks that day, that same hour. After that, I left that house to go to my parents' house out of state for a while. I left it to my dad to eventually sell that house. Anything of sentimental value we took out, and the rest was just left in there or sold. My father, of course, left out the fact that there's some creep who's been stalking the house for apparently decades now. How they potentially got a key, who they were, why my grandfather never said anything, I don't know. It all disturbs me deeply. I personally think it was some disturbed creep living in a nearby house. I eventually moved to a more urban area. This experience left me honestly too unsettled to live in a remote location. I'm 16 and live in the city now, but I've spent the first 8 years of my life in the countryside. For some people, it might seem weird, as I was allowed from a very young age to walk around the small village without being supervised by my parents. The area itself wasn't very big, and the entire population was about 90 people maximum. Basically, everyone knew everyone, to the point that me and my friends remembered the car numbers and whom they belonged to. It was a hot summer day. My friend and I, who all called Julian, were dead thirsty for some Coca-Cola. Back then, soda was very cheap at those little supermarkets, and we really needed a couple of pennies to get the right amount of money to buy 2 cans. Luckily, an old woman called us from her house. She explained that she was going to make some mint tea for everyone since her birthday was coming up. The issue was, she ran out of mint plants, so she told us that if we'd fill 2 plastic bags with mint leaves, she would buy us as much soda as we wanted. Julian and I thought it was a great idea, since I didn't want to ask my parents for any money. Soon later that day, we started digging. The sun was literally frying our foreheads, and our clothes were soaked in sweat. We searched for mints, but despite our efforts, we barely filled half of the first plastic bag. Both of us were very mad, since we knew there was no way we would actually manage to gather enough leaves before the sun went down. Still, we kept walking and looking around, hoping that some miracle would happen and we would find a field full of plants. Suddenly, 2 tall guys approached us, completely out of nowhere, and when I say tall, they were probably like 5'7", yet they seemed like giants to our 7-year-old selves. And what surprised me the most was that they were both covered in black clothes, with large hoodies and tight pants. None of them looked older than 17, despite being very hard to make out their facial features. They talked to us in a very friendly, childish voice, their words carefully chosen to not raise any suspicion. "Are you kids both alone?" Julian looked at me. He seemed a little worried and made a hand gesture that signed to leave. Unfortunately, body language was never my cup of tea, so I didn't understand what he wanted us to do. I shifted my attention back to the 2 guys and spoke in a rather cheerful voice saying, "Yeah, we're actually looking for some mint plants," and then asked where we could find a bunch of those. We've been looking for so long and we're really tired. Now, I'm not really sure, but I have a short flashback of one of the 2 guys smirking when they heard what we were looking for. One of them crouched next to me and patted my head. Julian quickly came close to me, pulling me back by the arm a little when he saw the guy touching me. His expression was serious, almost a little panicked, and he asked, "Who are your parents?" You see, from where I come from, that question requested the answer to be by last name, since there were so few people, not many new generations were born. So asking who your parents were was a common way to identify the entire bloodline of the person. Julian was born in the countryside, so he knew the people much better than me. I assume he was scared because he didn't recognize the 2 guys, and the fact that they were talking to 2 small kids without anyone around and even patting my head instantly sent a red flag to him. Just as he feared, they avoided the question, looking like I was their main interest. "Actually, I've seen a big field of mints. You see that hill over there? That's where we come from. If you want, we could lead you to the field and help you fill those bags, or even more." Of course, we knew that hill. Julian and I and the other kids would play hide and seek in its forest at night, and it was such fun I can't even describe it. But still, not once have I ever seen any sort of mint field. After all, the only things that grew there were corn, grapes, and some watermelons. Again, I was a very idiotic kid, and all of those red flags meant nothing serious to me. I nodded eagerly, pulling Julian by the arm to come with me. The guys seemed satisfied, and began to lead the way. We were walking further and further away from the village, and I could feel my friend's hand tremble in mine. At that point, I felt a sudden shiver down my spine, as the village was now completely nowhere to be seen. The forest was right in front of us, and I could see that there was no trace of any field of mint. I tried asking the guys where we were going, but they gave very vague answers like, "You'll see," or "Just be patient." I began to sweat as well, and slowed my steps a little. Panic was rushing through my veins, and I quickly realized something bad was going to happen. But for some reason, I couldn't stop walking. I knew for sure that if either of us tried to step back, something really, really bad would happen. Then, very discreetly, Julian came close to my ear, and I still get chills remembering this so vividly. He whispered as silently as he could, "There's something wrong with these two. Run." That was the last thing I heard when Julian began sprinting downhill like crazy, his hand not breaking contact with mine for a single second. I was running as if my life depended on it, and it probably did, actually. I could hear the two guys curse, and eventually they started chasing us from behind. I started crying loudly with fear, not stopping in my tracks. I'm sure I wasn't even breathing, and I can't understand how in the world I ran for almost 2 kilometers back into the village without a break or a breath. The woman who asked us to look for the mint saw us both, full of tears and sweat. Our faces were pale, as if all the blood left our bodies in that very moment. At some point as we got closer to the village, those guys must have stopped following us. She calmly took us inside and gave us some chocolate to feel better. She asked what had happened, and Julian was the one to tell her since my mouth was completely paralyzed. As soon as he finished, the woman gave us a worried look and scolded us for being so stupid. Well, scolded Julian, as he lied, saying I didn't want to follow them and he insisted on trusting the guys. After that incident, he wasn't allowed to come outside and play for a month, while I needed lots of time to recover from the small trauma. I never found out who those guys were, or what they wanted from us. Looking back now, much older, I can likely guess, and that doesn't sit well with me. While we were running, there was a huge chance I could have tripped and fell, since running downhill at that speed was very risky. If it wasn't for Julian, who is now my boyfriend, I don't even want to imagine what those guys would have done to us. My parents used to work a lot when I was little. They both had to work 2 jobs because they needed extra support for me and my older brother Cameron. Their jobs kept us on our feet, but still required them to be gone most of the time, so they hired a babysitter for us on some website. It was a young white girl, maybe early 20s, named Michelle. For about 4 to 5 months, Michelle came over every weekday to babysit us. Me being 7 and Cam being 8, we both loved having Michelle around. She was young, polite, and very energetic, which meant we could have a lot of fun playing with her versus some old lady that's always tired and in a bad mood. Cam and I did online classes because school would be too hard for my parents to keep up with. Michelle also helped with that a lot. When summertime came around, my parents told Michelle she should go relax for a bit. You know, they wanted her to have a nice summer vacation, especially after all she'd done for us. But that also meant that we didn't have a babysitter for the summer. My parents didn't want to go through the process of finding a trustworthy babysitter, so they decided to just take Cam and I to our grandparents' house. They lived in Texas in the countryside, which is a little far from our house in Oklahoma, but it would be worth a drive given we'd be there all summer. The weekend came around, and on Saturday, we started our drive. The ride was beautiful, but obviously to little me, it was the most boring, nauseous experience ever. We finally made it to their house after what felt like forever. It was a medium-sized cabin-looking house in the middle of a big open field and woods around the back. A little off to the side was kind of a barn-style building with an area for animals such as cows, goats, chickens, and other cool stuff. We all said our hellos, and right away, my grandpa wanted to take Cam and I on a little tour around the place. My parents stayed inside talking to my grandma as she cooked dinner for us. The night was amazing. We got to catch up with Grandma and Grandpa, and we played a little bit with their dog Cora. When it was time for bed, my brother and I shared a room with a bunk bed and a TV. The room next door was another bedroom where my parents slept. My mom and dad fell asleep very fast because they were tired from the drive, and they had to be home the next day for work on Monday. Cam and I stayed up a little bit longer watching some cartoons on TV. After a bit, we finally went to sleep with the TV on. Around 2 a.m., I was woken up by the sound of footsteps outside my window. Heavy footsteps. I couldn't see what was out there because the window had blinds over them. The footsteps didn't wake up Cam because the TV was still playing, but I could still hear them. I then heard a weird noise coming from the window, and after 2 seconds, I heard a grunt. Someone was trying to open it. I went to my parents' room to wake them up and tell them. They didn't really believe me and thought it was my imagination, of course, but when they went to check, nothing was there. So they just brushed it off as an animal sound. We were in the middle of nowhere after all, and maybe my kid brain really did think it was something it wasn't. I fell back asleep after 5 minutes of just laying there. In the morning, I woke up to the delicious smell of my grandma cooking breakfast as my parents were packing to go home. We all ate together, then my parents were off. Once they left, my grandpa took Cam and I to go feed the animals while taking Cora on a walk. I wanted to have Cora's leash, so my grandpa handed it to me, saying to hold on tight. As we were walking along the trail, I found myself having to pull Cora a little bit every 5 seconds. When I finally looked to see why she wasn't walking, I saw her staring at something. She was staring in the woods. I was a little scared to look in the direction, but when I did, I saw a black figure standing there staring at us. Even though it was all black, I could tell he was looking at us. He was half behind a tree with his hands on the wood, as if he were trying to peek over, but with his whole body. I turned to my grandpa to tell him, but him and Cam were already like 15 feet ahead of me. I ran to catch up with them while having to pull Cora a little bit, but once I told my grandpa about the man in the woods, the man vanished. It was like he was never even there. I thought I would have been able to see him if he ran off, but where could he have gone? My grandpa heard about what happened the night before, so me telling him something like that couldn't be me playing tricks on them. I could tell in his face that he was concerned, but he just told me that it was okay and that it was probably a deer in the distance, and that when I ran, I scared it off. After we fed the animals, we went back to their house. We enjoyed the rest of the day watching movies and playing outside in the sprinklers. That night, my grandma made the best dinner too. There was a lot of food, so after eating, I was really tired. I took a quick 10-minute bath and headed right to mine and my brother's room. Again, we watched cartoons for a bit and fell asleep. Around 1 a.m., I was woken up by the sound of humming outside the window. It was humming to the theme song of Cyber Chase, the show that was playing. Cam, being the heavy sleeper he was, didn't wake up to it. And as I said earlier, the blinds were over the window, so I couldn't see what it was. But I knew for sure at this point it had to be a person. At first, I thought it was my grandpa outside smoking, and for some reason he started humming the intro because he heard it through the window. Of course, that was a dumb explanation, but me being the kid I was, I yelled out, "Grandpa?" The humming stopped. After 30 seconds of no sound, I then heard, "Hey, it's Grandpa. Come out here, kid. I want to show you something cool." I then proceeded to put on my shoes and went outside. There were no lights, but I remember how beautiful the night sky looked. I finally got to my window where I saw my grandpa standing. He reached out his hand for me to grab it. I took his hand, and he started leading me towards the barn. I tried talking to him, asking where we were going, but no answer. I started to rethink what was happening. Why would my grandpa be outside at 1 a.m. showing me something cool? Why was he wearing a sweater with the hood up? Then I looked at my grandpa's hand and really paid attention to it, only to realize it wasn't my grandpa's hand. It was the hand of someone much younger. I tried to pull my hand away, but his grip only got stronger. I didn't want to let him know I knew something was wrong, so I stayed quiet, even though my heart was pounding. Then I looked behind him and noticed a long handle sticking out of the back of his pants. That's when I really panicked inside. Suddenly, I heard my grandpa's voice calling from the house. I didn't say anything back, but the man turned his head toward the sound. In that moment of distraction, I yanked my hand free and started to back away. The man stood there for a second, then suddenly bolted toward the woods. I ran straight for the house, yelling for help. By the time I got inside, my grandpa was waiting for me with his arms wide open, and my grandma had the phone to her ear talking to the police. Not long after, the cops showed up and started searching the area. They found the man hiding in a ditch not far from the house. In that ditch was some stuff he'd taken from the barn, and most disturbingly of all, they said he had an axe tucked into the back of his pants. After further investigation, they found that the lock on my grandpa's shed had been broken off, leaving it open for anyone to get anything they pleased. In the shed were a lot of tools that could have caused more trouble. After a couple of days, my grandpa found out that that man turned out to be Michelle's ex-boyfriend, who I'll just call Dave. Dave admitted to have been stalking us and planned to take me that night. He figured it was easier to take a little girl, so he went after me. He said he wanted to take me because he knew Michelle cared about me a lot, and if he had threatened to hurt me, he could make Michelle do anything. Dave stated he mainly wanted to use me to get back with Michelle because he wanted to start over and live a happy life with her. He claimed he was never actually going to hurt me. After this whole incident, our parents picked Cam and I up a week later and started looking for better jobs so they could be home with us more often. They also let Michelle go, which is understandable. I'm so grateful that the police station wasn't that far from my grandparents' house. But most importantly, I'm thankful my grandpa had woken up that night to use the bathroom. Even after 20 years, it still gives me chills to think about what would have happened to me that night. I'm the middle sibling of 3. I have 2 brothers. They both grew up as scouts. My older brother made it to Eagle Scout. My little brother quit some time in Boy Scouts. But for whatever reason, my parents never forced me to become a scout when I was a kid. Which is weird, because I remember always being really jealous of my older brother Scott when my mom would bring me along to the Pinewood Derby contests and celebrations and such. But the thing that I was always the most jealous that I missed out on were the campouts. When the troops would go out into the wilderness and camp out for a whole weekend. I went along for the drive once or twice, and I saw them all setting up, doing campfires and such, but being younger and also not part of the troop, I don't think I was allowed to stay, so I'd go home with my parents. My jealousy of these campouts was mainly towards my older brother because I was growing up watching him prepare for these camping trips. Before every trip, he'd be given a tent to take home and practice setting up in the backyard. Even though I was only like 7 or 8, I remember so clearly how eager I was when I hatched the idea to do a little backyard camping. Basically, we set up the tent in the backyard and sleep in it overnight. To my little mind, that was the most exciting idea ever. Also, our backyard wasn't really a traditional backyard. Our childhood house was in a very spacious neighborhood where yards just kind of all meshed together and there weren't many fences, more so large patches of trees and brush separating yards, which added to the camping feel. Our backyard was also huge, and we had a fire pit, so our parents played along and set up the fire pit in our backyard for us so we could get the full camping experience. My little brother roasted marshmallows with us too, but our parents weren't going to let him sleep in the tent. He was only like 4 at the time, and it wasn't a good idea. And no, he wasn't a scout yet, obviously, he was 4. After it got a little late, our parents brought him in and told us it was time to start getting ready for sleep. At this time in my life, the Game Boy SP was the handheld console. So after getting into our sleeping bags, Scott and I whipped out our Game Boys and played our respective games. I was playing Super Mario Bros. 2, a game I was obsessed with yet could never beat as a child. After getting a little more tired though, I turned to my side and tried to sleep. But I remember not being able to sleep. Like, I was tired, but restless. Maybe because I'd never slept in a sleeping bag before, and quite frankly, it wasn't comfortable. A lot of time passed, and I mean a lot, before I finally nodded off. And then, I woke up probably confused about where I was at first, not recognizing my surroundings. I remember looking around the dark tent, and then noticing something. Scott was gone. His sleeping bag was empty. The tent zipper was closed though. He must have went inside because he couldn't sleep. I was suddenly too scared to be in the tent alone, so I got up and unzipped the tent. But before crawling out, I did a little innocent peek outside simply because I was too scared to run out through the backyard without checking if the coast was clear. But it was not. I saw someone sitting by the fire pit in the darkness. It wasn't Scott. It was a grown man. He was facing the tent, and surely he had to have seen me. I gasped and zipped the tent back up and crawled back into my sleeping bag as if that piece of cloth was any form of protection. I stayed completely still inside my sleeping bag. The tent was almost completely dark, just a faint gray from the moonlight coming through the fabric. I don't know what was going through my mind at that point, But I do know that I wanted to call out Dad, just hoping that it was my dad. But I knew it wasn't. I got a look at the man, even just briefly, and if it were my dad, he'd have acknowledged me poking my head out of the tent. And that's when I heard the chair by the fire pit shift. I was shitting bricks, hoping the man didn't get up, and if he did, that he wasn't coming towards the tent. But I could see a shadow now on the other side of the tent, blocking some of the moonlight. He was right outside. Somehow, I thought if I didn't move, maybe he would think the tent was empty. Then I heard the zipper, very slowly dragging downward. It only moved a few inches. The opening was small, but it was enough. I couldn't help it. I turned my head just slightly. There's a small gap at the bottom of most tents where the zipper doesn't fully seal. I had never noticed it before that night. An eye was pressed against that gap. Just one eye, looking directly at me. I could see the white of it in the dark. I couldn't even scream at first. Not for a few seconds at least, because I was paralyzed. Then the eye squinted a bit, as if the person was smiling a smile that I couldn't see. The zipper moved another inch, and that's when I finally screamed. I scrambled backwards, kicking out of my sleeping bag, knocking into the tent poles. I heard footsteps immediately take off through the yard. Our back porch light flipped on, which I could see through the tent fabric. My dad burst out the back door yelling. I could hear him running across the grass. By the time he reached the fire pit area, whoever it was already gone. My parents called the police, of course. I don't remember what happened after my parents talked to the cops. I know I went to my parents' room with my mom, and eventually the police did their thing, likely searching the immediate area. It was an absolute nightmare. I slept in my parents' bed that night. I was emotionally scarred for a while. Just as things might have been going back to normal, I think it was a few weeks to a month later. This part is what really hammers the nail in the coffin for this experience being something I can never forget. I went to Catholic school, and during lunch we'd have a short recess in the schoolyard, which was all concrete. The far end of the schoolyard was fenced off and looked towards the street. We were playing some game, maybe red light, green light or something. This part I genuinely don't remember. All I know is I had to run to the fence to be considered safe from whatever the threat in the game was. And while I was on the fence, next to some other kids mind you, a man says hey from the other side of the fence. I turn, and it's a man asking me for directions to some place I don't even remember. I said I don't know. We weren't even supposed to talk to strangers outside of the schoolyard. Then he said, "Your name's Chris, right?" And that moment is implanted in my brain. His voice, the look on his face, and my heart dropping. I said no, lying to him. He then smiled and said, "You don't remember me, do you?" And at this point, I ran towards one of the recess chaperones and pointed over at the fence, but the man was gone. One of the kids next to me told me he saw the man too. The recess ladies called the recess in short, and the school called my parents. I was sure it was that man from the backyard. I was taken home early that day. I know my parents were so sick and worried after this. It was a hellish month. We lived in such a nice area too, and to almost be chased out of the neighborhood because of this was just a nightmare. After months of me being under tight supervision from my parents, things went back to normal. I can't express enough, though, how much it still pains me in my chest thinking about how I could be dead today if that man had somehow successfully taken me, and it makes me sick wondering if he was ever successful in whatever he was trying to do with someone else. I grew up in Salem, Oregon, a quaint little small town feeling place. I moved out when I was 21, buying my first house about 50 miles out from Salem. I furnished my first house with a mix of stuff for my parents, their friends, and a bunch of stuff off online marketplaces and apps. I was driving a Ford Raptor at the time, so lugging stuff around was thankfully very easy. On Facebook Marketplace one day, I found a listing selling a bunch of good-looking stuff. The ones in the listing that caught my eye were this cream-colored sectional couch that looked pristine, and this Cannondale brand mountain bike. I didn't have a bike at the time, and where my house is, having one is perfect for exercise. The other stuff on the listing didn't really interest me. The listing itself was just sort of a digital yard sale. I contacted the seller, and we did a little typical back and forth. He was pretty short and straight to the point with his answers, and surprisingly easy to negotiate. He agreed to a slightly lower price, and he said I could come pick the stuff up later that night. Days are long in Oregon in the summer, so I'd still be showing up with some sunlight. I banked on having to do a couple trips to transport the sectional couch due to its size. I set out on my way to the house. The address was right on the coast. I checked the satellite view on the map just to confirm it was bringing me to a house, and it was. Based on the map, there was a long trail or driveway that veered off the road towards a huge open property with a big-looking house, and then in the backyard was a literal drop-off to the ocean. All I could think was, no wonder these people were selling all this stuff for so cheap. With that kind of money, I wondered why they weren't just giving it away. I headed out that way, and it didn't take long to get there. I could tell the closer I got to the shore, the nicer the properties got. And then I turned onto the last road before I'd be turning onto the driveway for the house. This road was long. It was lined with woods on each side, and then I'd pass the occasional driveway leading to probably a cliffside mansion. Eventually, I made it to the turnoff. It was a tree-lined dirt road, or the driveway I guess you would call it. About 10 seconds in of driving down this driveway, it opened to this massive clearing. The driveway went on a slight incline leading to the house at the top of this hill. I pulled up next to this older sedan. It was like a Mercury Sable or something. It did not match the house at all. Like this house looked like it belonged to a millionaire, and this car was a piece of shit. I went up to the front door ready to ring the bell, but there was a yellow post-it note on the front door, and it said on it, "Doorbell broken, please use back door." Weird, because I could have just knocked, but I obeyed. As I walked down the front porch, I messaged the guy on Messenger that I arrived and was going around back. I walked around the side of the house, looking at each window as I passed, but the blinds all seemed to be closed. I got to the backyard, and it was crazy. It actually overlooked the Pacific Ocean. I walked up the back deck to go knock on the back door. It was a sliding glass door, but there was some kind of sliding blind that was closed, so I couldn't see inside. I knocked on the glass. I stood there for a minute, then knocked again. I looked down at my phone to see if he answered or read my message. Neither. I went to go sit on one of the chairs on the deck and spun it around to stare at the sunset and the view of the Pacific. It was a surreal view. I kept checking my Messenger app and following up with the guy, but he wasn't answering. I triple-checked that I had the right address, and I did. Plus, the note on the front door confirmed that. I decided if he was in the shower or occupied or something, I'd at least go walk over to the cliffside and get a picture of the view. I did just that. I walked down the deck, then down the seemingly freshly cut grass to the cliffside. Taking in the view, I daydreamed about one day being able to afford a place like this. I started walking back up to the house, but stopped maybe 3 steps in when I realized every single window now had their blinds open, and there was a person standing at each window, standing as still as statues. I didn't know if what I was looking at was some kind of prank or not. I walked a little closer, and the moment I said, "Nope, I've seen enough," was when I realized every single face was smiling. I honestly couldn't tell if they were mannequins or not. That's how still they were. I decided I just needed to get to the car. I did a light jog around the side of the house again, and that side window that I mentioned that also had its blind shut before was now too lifted, and there was someone at this window as well. I didn't know what was going on here, but I had to get out. As I got to the front, I got back in my car, and I didn't even look at the front windows. I didn't even want to know if there were people at these windows too. I reversed all the way down the driveway, and regrettably, I did at one point take a curious look ahead at the house. The front door was open, and there was a person standing on the front porch with his hands in his pockets, watching me drive away. It didn't matter. Everything about this was a red flag. I was out of there in a minute and down the road. The guy never opened or responded to my message still. I decided to turn into the closest neighbor's house driveway and knock on the door. They answered, and I explained the bizarre and disturbing situation I just encountered, and I pressed them about any info on their neighbor. The man who answered, who I'll call Tom, was shocked, because he's close friends with the guy next door, and he said he's hardly ever in town, and that he wouldn't set up some kind of elaborate prank like that. He called his neighbor on the spot, and the guy picked up. Basically, the conversation went as follows from what I remember. "Hey Jim, it's Tom next door. Listen, I got someone at my front door right now saying you invited him to your house to buy stuff, but you pulled some kind of scary prank on him with the windows and stuff." And there was a pause before the Tom guy said, "What are you talking about?" From here, I stepped in and explained everything from the Facebook ad to my arrival there to the people at the windows. He now sounded very concerned because he said he wasn't home this week. I did my best to describe every detail, including what the man on the front porch looked like, as well as the sketchy car. He asked me to take his number so he could contact me after the police investigated. After that, I left. I went home. I really didn't have it in me to commit 2 hours to some police investigation that didn't concern me, truth be told. But I did hear from the guy later that night. He called me and asked me to send him the Facebook listing, but it was removed. I did send him the details of the profile that I was messaging on the Messenger app, but it was now a blank profile. He thanked me for that and would give it to the police anyway. When I asked him what the cops found, he told me they found nothing stolen as far as he knew at that time, and that all the blinds were once again closed, and there was no sedan in the driveway, but that all 3 doors in the house were unlocked. Now the scary part for me is the way they were all standing at the windows smiling, trying to scare me. And I have to wonder, what use was I going to be of to them? And why did they want me in the backyard? Scary thoughts, honestly. I'm just glad I left when I did. I live with my parents in Murraysville, Pennsylvania. My parents were gone one weekend, so I decided I was going to have a bunch of people over in the backyard for a mini pool party. We have a pool house and an in-ground pool back there. It's perfect for parties, even though I rarely get a chance to throw anything. The rest of the backyard is a little bit of grass and then the woods behind the pool house. It's a very private backyard. Usually. You'll see what I mean soon. So the little party I planned was for Saturday night. Earlier that day, I was setting up outside. It was a little cloudy out, but since it was going to be a night party, that didn't really matter. The woods behind the pool house are pretty big. They go at least half a mile back before they reach another backyard. So there should really be no one walking through them. It's also our property. There are no trails or any reason for anyone to be back there. I was bringing out folding tables for beer pong and refreshments and setting them up when I heard a cough come from the woods. It was clearly a slow, throat-clearing kind of cough, like someone trying to get something out of their throat, and it was definitely a man. I froze with the table still in my hands. I just stood there listening. The wind was barely moving the leaves, so the sound carried really clearly. It came from just inside the tree line, not deep in the woods, close enough that whoever made it could definitely see me. I slowly set the table down and looked out toward the trees. Confused is one word to use, but unsettled would be a better one. No one should be in those woods, ever. I scanned the tree line and called out, "Who is that?" There was no answer. Not even any movement. No footsteps or branches snapping or anything. That almost made it worse. If it was some random guy walking through, I should have heard him moving away. But it was just quiet. I got that feeling in my chest, like I was being watched. Like someone was standing perfectly still just behind a tree, staring at me. I stood there for maybe 20 seconds just listening. The longer I stood there, the more uncomfortable I felt. Eventually, I just grabbed the rest of the stuff and brought it back inside for a bit. I didn't want to just stand out there alone anymore. I called my good friend Mark to come over early and help me set up. I decided not to mention the cough. I didn't want to sound paranoid before the party even started. Mark came over around 6 p.m. He brought some drinks and helped me finish setting up. I kept glancing at the woods while we were out there, but everything looked normal. Nothing moved. If someone had been there earlier, they were gone. The rest of my friends started showing up around 7 to 8. At the peak of the party, there were at least 20 people. Nothing insane, but it was a good time. There was music playing, people in the pool, lights around the patio on. With that many people there, the woods didn't feel creepy anymore. A couple times during the night, I caught myself looking toward the tree line though. I don't even know why. I guess that cough just stuck with me. Things started dying down around midnight, and by 1 a.m. the last of the guests had left. I figured I would leave the mess to clean up for tomorrow. I was tired and ready for bed. Before going inside, I did one last slow sweep of the backyard. I walked around the pool, checked behind the pool house, looked toward the woods again. Everything seemed normal. The water in the pool was still, the lights reflected off of it, no one was out there. I locked the back sliding door and and went upstairs to brush my teeth and go to bed. I was in bed scrolling on my phone for maybe half an hour before putting it down. It probably took another half hour of laying there trying to sleep when I heard a splash. Not a small one, not like something falling in. It sounded exactly like someone jumping into the deep end. My eyes opened immediately. I held still, listening. A few seconds later, I heard the sound of someone swimming, literal strokes through the water. My first thought was maybe someone from the party stayed behind as a joke, or they just woke up drunkenly. But I knew everyone who came. No one would do something like that. I checked my phone, and it was 2 a.m. I got out of bed and walked slowly to the window that overlooks the backyard. I didn't turn on any lights in my room. I didn't want whoever was out there to see me before I saw them. When I looked down at the pool, I saw there was a guy swimming calmly from one end to the other. At first, I tried to recognize him. I knew all 20 or so people who came over. This wasn't any of them. I leaned closer to the glass. The pool lights lit up his face just enough for me to know for sure. I had never seen him before. I yelled out the window, "Who is that?" The swimming stopped immediately. He looked up slowly toward my window. Even from that distance, I could tell he wasn't confused or startled. He just stared up at me. Then he started moving toward the shallow end. He climbed out of the pool, and that's when I saw how tall he was. He stood there dripping wet for maybe 2 seconds, just looking toward the house. I expected him to run away. Instead, he started walking toward the sliding door. Not running or hesitating, just walking fast and direct, like he already knew where he was going, almost in a march. I yelled again, "Hey, who is that?" He didn't respond. I heard the sliding door downstairs open. I know I locked it, I'm positive I did, but I heard it slide open. Then it slid shut. I ran to my bedroom door and locked it. That's when I noticed how much my hands were shaking. I grabbed my phone and texted Mark, asking him if he noticed anyone stay behind before leaving, but I didn't wait for a response. I immediately called 911. I whispered into the phone that there was an intruder in my house. I gave my address as quietly as I could. Then I heard the footsteps. They were slow, wet footsteps on hard wood. I could hear the slight stick of his feet lifting off the floor. He wasn't rushing, nor was he searching randomly. He was walking directly toward the stairs. Each step on the stairs creaked, one at a time. He reached the top. The hallway floor outside my room creaked. He stopped right outside my bedroom door. I could hear water dripping onto the floor. Then the handle moved. He tried opening it once, then twice, then a third time, harder each time. When he realized it was locked, there was a long pause. The 911 operator was saying something, but I had the phone set down. I could barely focus on what she was saying. Then the guy knocked on the door, 3 slow knocks. I picked up the phone and put it on speaker. My voice was shaking, but I said loudly that I was on the phone with the police and they were on their way. There was another long pause. Then a man's voice from the other side of the door said, very low and calm, "It's me, open the door." He sounded like a grown man in his 30s. I said, "I know that I don't know you. Leave now." There was silence again. 5 seconds, maybe more. Then I heard him turn and walk away quickly. I heard his wet footsteps go back down the hallway, then down the stairs, and a few seconds later, I heard the front door downstairs open and slam shut. I didn't move until the police arrived. When I finally went downstairs with them, there was a clear trail of water leading from the back door, up the stairs, all the way to the bedroom door. After searching the entire house, that was the only proof that he had ever been there. I texted everyone I invited, asking if they stayed behind or noticed anyone else stay behind. Anyone who was still awake said no. The rest texted back in the morning saying no. It was a complete stranger. And I have a feeling that cough I heard in the woods earlier that day was that man. I don't know how he got the door unlocked. Maybe he slipped in during the party when people were going in and out. As for a motive, I have no idea. I just know that if I didn't wake up when I did, or if I opened that bedroom door, I don't know what he would have done. When I was newly single after my 2-year relationship ended, I was back to living alone again, and back to swiping on Tinder and all those apps. I had been single for a few months already, and I had met a few people in that time. During that time, I matched a girl on Tinder named Tracy, and she gave me her Snapchat, but it quickly fizzled out to her just watching my stories and not really communicating. That kinda used to happen all the time when I was in college, but now being in my late 20s using Tinder and just being reminded of how immature all this online dating stuff is, it feels a lot different at this age. I own a corner townhome in a little community. If you're wondering what I do, I'm an accountant. Good money, but miserably boring. After my ex moved out, I thought I would be ready for the privacy and peace and quiet, but I'd say after the first month, the novelty of that wore off. Maybe I'm more of a relationship person, or I just need people around, but being alone was getting to me. That's why I was constantly swiping on dating apps and trying to go on dates, just to get out of the house. This was last December. I posted something on my Snap story that had to do with Christmas, and guess who commented on my story? It was that Tracy girl who I hadn't spoken to in weeks. She struck up a conversation about us doing some Christmas-themed stuff together, and from there we started chatting for a bit. I suggested the most festive things I could think of: ice skating, going to the village, and looking at the decorations, but she suggested we decorate my Christmas tree. Firstly, I did have a fake tree, but it was up in the attic, so I told her I didn't have it up yet because it's kind of a two-person job getting it out of the attic. She said she'd gladly come over and help, so I figured why not. I told her to come over around 9 that night. It was already dark at that point when we made the plan. It was likely like 7:30 because I remember hurriedly grabbing my keys and rushing to drive to the liquor store to buy a couple bottles of wine. When I got back to the house, I vacuumed and swept the floors. Ever since my breakup, the things my girlfriend would do to clean the place were left to me, and I realized how quickly a place can get dirty. 9 p.m. rolled around, and I was low-key sitting upright on the couch with the TV on, pretending like I was just chilling in the living room watching a movie already. Meanwhile, I had set everything up to be cozy and relaxing. But I sat there for a while, waiting on her to message me or for the doorbell. I sent a follow-up saying, "Let me know when you're on your way," and I eventually started to think she was flaking, until finally, around 9:30, when she said she's outside. She came inside, and I was shocked to find that I was looking up at her. She was a couple inches taller than me. I'm 5'10", so she had to be at least 6 feet tall. I also immediately picked up on the fact that she smelled like she was drenched in perfume. We went straight to the couch and sat down, and she sat really, really close to me, like our legs were touching. This is where I started to get confused in how exactly I was feeling. She looked a bit older, maybe a little rougher, I'm not sure how to explain it. And underneath that overpowering smell of cheap-smelling perfume, I couldn't help but feel like there was a slight hint of body odor, which completely turned me off. I asked her if she wanted wine, and she said yes please. So I went and poured a couple glasses as we talked. Have you ever met someone for the first time that you'd been texting or DMing for a while, and when you finally meet, they just end up being nothing like you pictured in your head? That was pretty much this. Something about her felt off, like she lacked certain social cues. I handed her a glass of Merlot, and we cheers each other. I shit you not, she almost immediately spilled a huge drop of red wine on my light blue couch. I composed myself, but I wanted to scream. I said it's okay, as I ran to the kitchen to get a damp paper towel and sponge. I ran back to the couch and blotted it as quickly as I could before it would settle. She kept apologizing, and I kept saying it was okay. After this, it got a little more tense, and to break the tension, I suggested I get the tree out of the attic. So I went up to the attic, slid over the giant box with all the tree parts in it, and started handing her down the pieces one by one, each piece getting bigger until we got to the biggest part, the part that I wouldn't be able to handle going down the ladder on my own. She grabbed it with ease. I had to remember this girl's size. Once everything was handed down, I went back down and we assembled the tree in the living room with Christmas music playing. I poured her more wine and I drank more myself. I loosened up a bit more. Wine makes any situation feel better. Once we had the tree set up, next was the ornaments. I told her my ornaments were all in the crawl space. These ornaments were all from my childhood. My parents gave me bins and bins of Christmas decorations. So I went down to the crawl space and one by one started taking out the bins, while I left Tracy in the living room to relax. As I was doing all of this, I started feeling woozy, like the wine was getting to my head. I've never been a heavy drinker, so I do have a low tolerance, but I felt like I hadn't drank that much to feel this way. I grabbed the first bin and started lugging it up the stairs. By the time I got to the top, Tracy wasn't anywhere in sight. I assumed she was in the bathroom at first and called her name. I looked around each room and then saw that the bathroom was empty. I scratched my head in confusion as I kept calling her name. I went to message her on Snap, but she never opened the Snap. I checked the 2 bedrooms too, but she was gone. I couldn't believe this. She snuck out on me. This was when I started wondering if she thought I was ugly or weird or something, even though truthfully, I wasn't even really into her either. I crashed onto the couch, which suddenly felt a lot more comfortable than before, and honestly, as far as I remember, I periodically checked my phone to see if she opened my Snap and just watched whatever was on TV, until my memory just faded to black. I swear, everything just went black. And then I woke up in darkness. No lights, no TV on. I looked around in the dark room, and I knew I was hearing things. I felt like I was still on the couch, and I felt weak. My limbs were hard to move, but I managed to find my phone right under me within seconds, and I checked the time. The second the phone screen lit up, I saw it. Even though the light was facing toward me, that glow from my phone screen with the brightness all the way up revealed the outline of a tall person's silhouette standing in front of me. For some reason, I didn't scream. I just put the phone down, bringing the room back to darkness. I finally opened my mouth to say, "Tracy," hoping it was her, but still not in that moment remembering what had happened earlier. Whoever was standing there didn't answer me. I eventually picked my phone back up and turned on the flashlight, and I saw that it was in fact Tracy standing in front of me. She wasn't moving, she was just looking down at me. I felt locked to the couch. I don't know if it was because of pure fear or the effects of whatever she had obviously laced me with. I genuinely was having a hard time moving my limbs. I felt weak and helpless. All I could manage to say was "Tracy" a couple more times. She turned towards the stairs, and again, I swear, she sprinted toward them, and all I heard were the disturbingly loud stomps of her running down the stairs. I heard something slam from downstairs. Looking back, I'd imagine it was the front door. Everything looked and sounded so wonky in those minutes after I woke up. Each passing minute, I felt more and more clear-headed, and moving became easier. I checked Snapchat to see that her account was gone, aka she blocked me. I looked out the front window and saw no cars outside besides my own and the neighbors'. And then I realized I never saw the vehicle that she arrived in, or if she even arrived in one. I checked my entire home from top to bottom, checking for anything that could have been stolen. The only items I found missing seemed kind of bizarre at first, but honestly made so much sense soon after. Every last bottle of pills from my house was gone. All my vitamins and supplements, my bottles of Adderall, and even the bottle of Oxy that I had prescribed but never fully used after a surgery, those were in the drawer next to my bed. I noticed a bottle of vodka was taken from my mini fridge in my room too, but other than that, I didn't see anything else that could have been stolen. Still, I called the police right then and reported the robbery. I gave the Snapchat username and explained that I never got her number or knew anything really about her identity minus the name that she gave me, which was Tracy Gibson. The police knocked on my neighbor's door since all of our homes are attached, even though it was like 1 a.m. With me standing next to them, they questioned if he'd seen or heard anything strange, to which he said no, he'd been asleep. After about 20 minutes, the police left. I made sure all of my keys were still in place so as to make sure she couldn't get back in, but other than that, this Tracy person disappeared without a trace. I knew her behavior was quirky and wonky from the first few minutes of meeting her, and it makes so much sense now. I won't even call it a theory because I just know this is the truth. I think that girl, or woman I should say, was older than she claimed, and she was potentially homeless with a serious drug addiction. I think she drowned herself in perfume to mask the body odor that was honestly still showing through. She laced my wine with something when I was in the attic clearly. I don't know exactly how long I was out, but it was enough for her to scour my entire home for any and all drugs and supplements. I still remember how disturbing of an image it was seeing her tall silhouette standing in front of me while I was just waking up on the couch. Honestly, after this, I didn't even decorate the tree that year. This happened on Christmas Eve back in '97 when I was 7 years old. Since we're Jewish, we don't celebrate Christmas, so Christmas Eve was just like any other night for us. Our dad is a doctor, and since he's Jewish, he always works on call at the hospital during the Christmas holidays, so he wasn't home tonight. That just left my little sister and I by ourselves for the evening while our dad worked. Technically, our mom was home, but to be blunt, she was an alcoholic. Back then, being a 7-year-old, I had no idea what alcoholism was. All I knew was that my mom was always passed out once it got dark and near impossible to wake up. Sorry if it sounds harsh or TMI, but it's relevant to my story. My sister and I were downstairs watching TV when we heard a knock at the door. Being the oldest, I went to see who it was. Our door had glass panes built into it, which made it easy to see who was on the other side. There was a man standing outside in a Santa suit holding a bag, and when he saw me, he smiled and waved at me to come to the door. I went near the door but did not open it, and I thought it was odd that someone dressed like Santa would come to our house out of anyone's house in the neighborhood. He said, "Hey kid, it's me Santa. Let me in, I'll give you your presents." I remember point blank telling him that Santa isn't real, and that if he was, he doesn't give Jews presents anyway. That's when he said, "Of course I'm real. In the past, I only used to visit Christian homes, but lately, I felt bad that Jewish kids never get any presents. So this year, I changed the rules so that you can get presents too." But I didn't buy it, and instead, I remember getting mad at him, arguing that Jews get presents. We just get them during Hanukkah and not on Christmas. The smile fell from his face, and all his jolly charm disappeared as he began demanding I open the door. I told my sister to dial 911, and the guy seemed to run away. We did call the cops. However, unfortunately, the operator didn't understand what we were saying. Looking back, I think she may have thought we were just little kids excited that Santa Claus was coming to our house. Regardless, she didn't take us seriously, and instead just told us that this number was to be used for emergencies only before disconnecting the call. My sister and I now got really scared because we didn't know who else to call. Since we were only 4 and 7, the only numbers we knew how to dial were our home number and 911. And since this is the 90s, my dad didn't have a cell phone yet, and I had no idea what the hospital number was to reach him there. And with our mom impossible for us to wake up, we were essentially on our own. We hoped the man wouldn't come back, but a few minutes later, he was knocking on the door again. He said he knew the cops weren't coming and to go ahead and let him in or we'd be in big trouble. My sister started crying and ran upstairs trying to wake my mom. Not knowing what else to do, I did the one thing that made sense to my 7-year-old brain. I grabbed a bunch of candles we keep for our menorah and lit them all, then ran below where the smoke detector was. I blew out all the candles quickly before tossing them all up to the smoke detector. Thankfully, they gave off enough smoke to set off the smoke alarm. As an adult, I realized how stupid this was, and fortunately, I did not accidentally set the house on fire. But at that time, all I knew was that the smoke alarm would instantly call 911 for me and send help to our home. There was a fire department not even 2 minutes from our house, so they got here pretty fast. My sister came downstairs, scared of the fire alarm, but I told her there was no fire and to not go outside, but instead wait inside with me. To my amazement, the guy still did not leave. Instead, the bastard ran to the firefighters, presumably telling them that he was glad they showed up. I remember that he claimed he was my dad, and that he dressed up like Santa Claus for Christmas Eve to surprise us. He explained that his suit didn't have any pockets to hold his keys, and that with the door locked, he couldn't get the door open to save us from the fire, so he begged the firefighters to break down the door, and surprisingly, the firefighters seemed to believe him. They were actually getting ready to break down the door, and told us to stand back, but we started crying, shouting at them that he's not our dad, that our dad is working at the hospital and that we have no idea who this guy was, and that we don't even celebrate Christmas. The firefighter who was about to break down the door thankfully stopped and listened to us. He asked, "You don't celebrate Christmas?" I told him no because we're Jewish, and showed him my kippah on my head as well as our menorah. I then broke down crying, explaining how I set off the smoke alarm to try and get help because the police wouldn't believe us, and to please not let the guy in. The firefighter thankfully believed me, and then asked the guy why Santa would show up to a Jewish home. I don't remember exactly what the guy said, but the firefighters clearly didn't believe him. Two of them wrestled the guy to the ground while the other called the police to come by. They also asked what hospital my dad worked at so they could let him know what was going on. The police arrived and arrested the guy, while another officer stayed with us until my dad came home and explained the situation to him. My dad was furious with our mom for being wasted and essentially sleeping through the whole thing, but mostly he was grateful that we were okay. As far as Christmases go, I was glad to have our usual boring and quiet Christmas the following year. To this day, I think being Jewish saved my sister and I's lives, because had we opened that door to let Santa in, there's a good chance that would have been our final Christmas. It was December 2022. My girlfriend Charlotte and I were driving to the Pocono Mountains. We had rented a super cozy looking Airbnb decked out with Christmas decorations, and it was nicely located with a nice view, big property, and not far from a cute little village. To make things even more festive feeling, there was a snowstorm coming that night, so we set out on the road a little earlier to allow us time to get groceries and everything set up in the Airbnb. From the city to the Poconos was about 4 hours. We made decent time. We stopped at a Family Dollar for some snacks and groceries, and then we went straight to the Airbnb. We turned towards the uphill gravel road through a clearing in the trees that led to the property. The house was surrounded by woods. It had a big deck with a hot tub on it, which was very appealing, especially the idea of sitting in it during a snowstorm. There were a bunch of Christmas decorations on the property, including some light-up reindeer, a big snowman, and big decorative candy canes lining the walkway to the front deck. We had to take a few trips to and from the car to bring everything inside. First impression, the place had a very comfy feeling as we expected from the pictures. It had a Christmas tree in one corner, stockings hung on the walls, and a bunch of smaller decorations scattered about. It had that very welcoming smell of wood that you'd expect in a country log cabin, though it was more so just a regular house. Then I realized why. There was a stack of logs next to a big fireplace in the living room. There were 3 bedrooms, though of course we only needed 1. We put our luggage and such in a second bedroom. I did the usual stuff like inspect the fridge, turn on the TV to see if there's cable or Netflix, and look out all the windows. There was an upstairs, but it was more of a loft with a pool table and a couple of couches. Then there was a basement. For the hell of it, I went down to check out the basement. It was fairly big relative to the size of the house. It felt disconnected from the Airbnb though. It wasn't furnished for hanging out in. It was dark and cold and felt more like a space to do laundry and a workspace. Then there was a knock at the front door. I hurried up to answer it, and there was a guy who looked to be in his late 40s. He was wearing gray sweatpants and a ripped up yellowish brown jacket. He smiled at me and said, "How are you folks doing?" I replied good and asked him if he was the Airbnb host. He replied he runs the place with his brother. I asked for his name, and he said Tom. Tom said he lives just up the road next door if my girl and I need anything. I thanked him, and then he walked away. I found it interesting that he knew I was with my girlfriend. Charlotte didn't come to the door, but maybe his brother told him about us. I did have a conversation with Mike, the host, about it being my girlfriend and I wanting to do something festive. It was pitch black out and it was snowing. We cranked up the heat in the house and started preparing the dinner we bought, which was chicken thighs, broccoli, potatoes, and cornbread. It was pretty grab bag. We ate on the couch with the Christmas tree lights on in the corner, giving the room a nice comfy glow as we watched the Polar Express. It was the only good Christmas movie on any of the streaming platforms. If you can't tell, we really love Christmas. After the movie, and when we felt we had digested enough, we went outside to the deck to hop in the hot tub. I turned on all the decorations and Christmas lights in the front yard, and as we sat in the hot tub watching the snowfall, it felt like bliss, until the bubbles on the hot tub stopped and it went silent, and we heard unmistakable footsteps from somewhere on the property. Charlotte and I looked at one another. I asked her if I should shout who's there, but she said no. The footsteps moved further and further until they were no longer audible. I told Charlotte it was probably a deer, but deep down, I knew those were the footsteps of a person. After the hot tub, we went to take a shower before bed. The hot water in the shower didn't last for more than maybe 2 minutes though. Something was wrong. When the water turned ice cold, we screamed and jumped out of the shower. I messaged Mike, the host, about it. He responded within half an hour saying that's odd and that he'll have a guy come and look at the hot water heater tomorrow. We went to sleep after our half shower. In the middle of the night, though, we awoke to very aggressive bangs on the front door of the house. Charlotte was shaking me, terrified. I said I'm gonna check who it is, but she demanded I stay in the bed and don't make a sound. Honestly, I was glad she said that. No part of me wanted to know who was at the door in the middle of the night. I think there were 3 sets of really loud and angry sounding bangs before they stopped. We sat upright for a few minutes in silence, whispering to each other. I went over to lock the bedroom door for added security, I guess. Minutes dragged along, but ultimately, after about half an hour of sitting wide awake, we eventually drifted back off to sleep. First thing in the morning, I messaged Mike again about the knocks at the door. He answered more quickly this time, seeming pretty confused like us. He basically said how strange that is. He didn't know why anyone would be roaming around late at night like that. He said if anything like that happens again, that we should alert the authorities. Honestly, not the most reassuring response, but I mean, he was right. What else could he tell us? Grab a gun and shoot whoever was at the door? I didn't want to keep complaining to Mike constantly, but I mean, these were some valid concerns I was bringing up to him. There was a lot of snow outside, and it was a dark, cloudy day. There were still some flurries falling onto the ground. I went out to wipe the snow off my Jeep, and while I was doing so, I noticed footsteps in the snow. They looped around the house. I remembered the knocks from the night before, and wondered if it was from the same person. But these footprints looked fresh, and it snowed all night. Surely the footprints from last night would have filled in by now. I heard footsteps approaching now, actually, and I saw Tom walking from around my car. I told him about the hot water heater problem, and that Mike said they were sending someone to take a look at it. He said he knew and that he was here to take a look at it, actually. I also told him about the knocks at the door last night and the footprints in the snow. I even showed him. He looked at them and said there's a lot of strange folk out here that go snooping around at night. I asked if we should refrain from using the hot tub at night then, and he said no, that shouldn't be a problem. The people around here are harmless. He went inside into the house and walked around for a bit before walking down to the basement. He told me he'll have a look at the hot water heater. Tom seems like a weird dude, honestly. I messaged Mike saying Tom's here now checking out the water heater. Mike replied back asking, is Tom the name of the plumber? And I replied, no, your brother. He replied, what do you mean? He said he's my brother? It started to click in my head. I responded, do you have a brother named Tom who runs this Airbnb with you? And he replied, no, who is this person? I hurried to Charlotte and told her to collect her things quietly. We need to get out of here. As quickly as we could, we packed our bags, grabbed all of our stuff, and brought it outside to the car in one trip. I'm sure we left behind a charger or something small, but who cares? We got in my car, and when I started it, I looked in the rearview mirror and saw Tom quickly approaching the rear of the Jeep. I put it in drive and drove out of there as quickly as I could. When we were back on the road, we called Mike and explained everything and told him he needs to call the police now. He didn't stay on the line with us for long, but 20 minutes later, he called us back. We were in the car still. He said the police were there now and didn't see anyone in the house. Mike was on his way to the house as well, but he was mostly calling to get more details from us. We drove around the area and explored just as a way to calm our nerves after what just happened. After a few hours, we drove home. Mike messaged me later that night updating me and apologizing for everything. He said he didn't know anyone who resembled my description of Tom. What disturbs me is that man was watching us the entire time, from the moment we arrived to when we were in the hot tub, and he was probably the one banging on the front door in the middle of the night. Who knows what his intentions were? It's a good thing we left when we did, though.
It was Halloween night of 2007, freshman year in high school, and I was with my friends Ivan, Ryan, and Jesse. We were all dressed as the Super Mario characters. I was Luigi since I was the second tallest. Ivan was Mario since he's short and buff. Not that Mario is buff. Jesse was Waluigi because he's freakishly tall and skinny, and Ryan was Wario because he's just really fat. So they were the perfect group costumes for us. We live in a very non-congested suburban neighborhood with a decent amount of space in between houses. On Halloween, that's the worst thing ever. Less bang for your buck. We were trick-or-treating for hours, way past dark, and eventually came the time when most trick-or-treaters were heading home. My feet started to hurt, and I had to constantly switch arms for holding the now 10-pound pillow sack of candy, but we planned on going until our bags were completely full. A lot of the houses by now weren't answering anymore. It was probably past their cutoff time for giving candy to trick-or-treaters. Approaching our next house, we saw a purple bucket on the stoop, which was the best feeling ever. I was the one to get close enough to realize it was empty, which was the worst feeling ever. I turned around when I heard a knock at the window of the house. We all looked at the window. Couldn't see anyone, but heard someone call out, "Wait." The door opened and an older man, late 40s, already balding, stepped outside. He told us to come inside so he can get us some more candy. I said we could just wait out here. He responded saying something along the lines of, "Nonsense, come on in, we'll get you your candy." Ivan stepped in and said, "It's alright. Come on, Dan, let's go." I told the guy to take care and apologized. He just stood there watching as we walked off, not saying anything. I felt bad, but at the same time, that guy seemed like a creeper, and I figured I just dodged a bullet not going in there. If the story ended there, it wouldn't be scary, so of course, it didn't end there. We skipped a few of the guy's neighboring houses just to get further away and continued on with our business. We were walking down close to the nature preserve now, so there weren't many houses around us. At this point, we were now walking back closer to Jesse's house. I noticed Ryan had stopped walking, and I turned around to see what's up. He said he heard someone moving from behind the trees in the preserve. Now this was before everyone's phones had flashlights, so we couldn't just go searching in the woods for someone. Besides, we were just telling Ryan that it must have been a raccoon or something. You may think this is a bit of a cliche, but when things like this happen in real life, you always assume the more logical possibility. It's just natural. Why would we assume we were being followed? I had to put my arm around Ryan's shoulder and nudge him forward. A little ways down the street, me and Ivan picked up on the sound as well. When we all stopped, the sounds of the footsteps from beyond the trees stopped as well. Ivan yelled at the obvious stalker to go away, or we would beat the shit out of them. I knew he was just bluffing though. I could hear the nervousness in his voice. The snap of a twig from beyond the trees triggered a fight-or-flight response in all of us. Me, Jesse, and Ryan all ran for it. Ivan was at first charging to attack, but he quickly followed after realizing we had all taken off. We ran down the dark street, and we all noticed the sounds of at least 2 or 3 pairs of footsteps crushing the twigs and leaves in the woods. We banked it hard right down Jesse Street when it finally came up, and ran straight for his backyard, entering his house through the back door. The first thing we did was peek out through his living room window. We couldn't see anyone. We all had to gather our thoughts and discuss what the hell just went down in his living room, when all of a sudden we heard Jesse's backyard gate slam shut. Jesse dove to turn off the lights. There was a click and a bang from down in the den. It was more than likely Jesse's back door. We all agreed to go down armed with knives and face them. Jesse turned on his back door light, but there was nobody out there. Just then the front door opened, and we all screamed like animals. Jesse's mom and sisters came rushing downstairs. They had just gotten home from their friend's little house party. We all rested assured knowing it was just them. Jesse explained what happened, but made it seem a lot less dramatic. Me and Ivan went home after that and called it a night. At 12:30 a.m., I got a disturbing text message. It was from Jesse. It said, "It wasn't my mom." I texted back saying, "What?" He responded back quickly, saying, "It wasn't my mom in the backyard." My fingers slammed the buttons on my phone, responding back, "What do you mean?" There was a long pause before he finally told me that his mom and sisters said they never went in the backyard. I told him to immediately check the backyard from his upper deck. He had already done just that. He also told his mom everything, and she had already called the police. They didn't find anyone back there, but Jesse did mention the guy who invited us in while trick-or-treating. Nothing ever became of that, and nothing ever happened at Jesse's house again after that one Halloween night. Last Halloween, I was asked to chaperone my little brother Kevin, my little cousin Mike, and his friends while they trick-or-treated. No, I wasn't the typical cliched teenager that was pissed off because I had better things to do. I was perfectly content with hanging out with my little brother, my little cousin, and his friends. I was 18 years old, so I was a bit old to actually be collecting candy myself, so I asked my little brother to carry a smaller bag and put some candy in there for me at each house. By the time that small plastic bag was full, I was asking the kids if they were ready to go home, and every time I would ask, they would say no. They insisted on filling their bags to the top, but that was out of the question. I had enough, so I started leading them back in the direction of Mike's house. Suddenly, a white van pulled up next to us. The driver rolled down the passenger side window and asked me if I could help him out with something. "Nah, I gotta get these kids home," I said, as I directed my attention back to the group. He said he just needed me to fix his passenger seat into the upright position, as it was a two-person job, and he said he had a date. I told him it would have to be quick. He parked his car and told me to get inside. I opened the door and began fidgeting with the seat. He was telling me to lift, and then I would lift. He would then say, "Put it back down." I'm gonna be honest, I thought this guy was just flat out dumb, until I heard the kids screaming outside. There was somebody trying to grab one of Kevin's friends. I almost fell on my face as I tried to get out of the van. When I did, I grabbed him by the throat and began to strangle him. The driver came out and shoved me to the floor and attempted to grab Kevin, but the owner of the house we were in front of came out front with a rifle in his hand. He fired a shot in the air, a warning shot, and with that, the two creeps hopped back in their van and drove off. I tried to grab a hold of one of them, but I wasn't quick enough. The van was gone down the street before I could even take 5 steps after getting up. I couldn't express enough gratitude to that old man who came out with the rifle. I wish I could say the story ended there, happily, but unfortunately the next day while watching the news, there was a report of a missing 9-year-old boy in our town. Now, I usually believe in coincidences, but I know that wasn't any coincidence. And I know for the rest of my life, it will kill me, remembering how I could have prevented a kidnapping had I just grabbed a hold of one of those guys. Me, my best friend Jordan, and my friend Chris were trick-or-treating on Halloween night. We live in a really rural side of Pennsylvania, and Halloween always kind of sucked because of that. For all you city and urban kids, Halloween is a lot different when you live in a quiet, rural area. First of all, and most obviously, the walking distance between houses is much worse. However, people tend to give more candy to us since they get less trick-or-treaters. And that's the second thing, less trick-or-treaters. It's actually kind of rare to see other people trick-or-treating by us, mainly because we live in the middle of East Bumblefuck. So it didn't feel as festive or just Halloweenish. I'll tell you right now, it felt a lot spookier though, walking down foresty roads all alone with your group, only with the occasional house. And for that, maybe it was a perfect place for Halloween. It was our first house of the night. I remember the kind old man who answered had a huge bowl of Kit Kats and Snickers. He poured at least a pound of candy into each of our bags. It was great. Our next house was quite some hike away, but once again, the woman who answered was very friendly and gave a very generous amount of candy. After about 6 houses, our bags were starting to get heavy, but you have to realize it took almost half an hour to hit those 6 houses. We reached the entrance of the dirt road leading to smaller houses and trailer homes. The first 2 houses on this dirt road we tried didn't answer, so we decided to try one more on this road before turning around to find another area. We reached the very appropriately eerie property of a smaller house along the dirt path. The whole front yard had an orange glow because of the 4 torches that were lit up leading to the front porch. There was an orange bowl on the stoop decorated with black silhouettes of witches, pumpkins, and other Halloween themes. Besides 2 stray Tootsie Rolls, the bowl was empty. There was a sign on the door that read, "If there is no more candy, enter the back at your own risk for more." Under that there was an evil-looking smiley face, along with an arrow pointing to the backyard. Chris said let's just turn around and go back, but Jordan and I wanted to go around back. It seemed interesting, as if they had something cool set up. Chris had no choice but to follow us around the house to the backyard, which was a small clearing from the miles of forest that surrounded. The backyard was lit up orange as well, but not as brightly. There was a single torch that sat in the middle of the small yard. It provided enough orange light to see a note on the back door. We got closer to the back door and read the note. It was some kind of riddle. It said, "If candy is what you desire, then you have to look closer to the fire." And yes, I still remember that stupid riddle to this day. So of course we assumed that by the fire meant by the torch. Chris was saying he did not like this, that it seemed too suspicious. I was kind of weirded out a bit too, but Jordan seemed interested in it, and I didn't want to seem scared to him. Plus, it was the most interesting thing to happen all night in this boring town. There was nothing around the torch though. It was literally just dug into the center of the backyard. There was a small wooden shed by the corner of the clearing, and in the other corner were a bunch of tools and wood scattered across the grass. Jordan tried leading us closer to the woods, but I was with Chris now. I was pushing for Jordan to just leave now, as it was too weird and creepy to be looking for candy in a stranger's backyard. He kept telling me, hang on, one more minute." While he was looking around, I started to examine the place. The house had an old, dirty look to it, surely a very low-income home. I started to examine the windows. One of them was cracked, the other had blinds closed, and then I looked up at the upstairs window. There was somebody looking down at us, specifically at me. When he or she noticed me, they moved away from the window and shut the blinds. I told Jordan we should go. I looked over to the window of the wooden shed. I could see someone poking their head out ever so slightly. I grabbed Jordan, yanking him over to follow me, but he was frozen still. He was looking up at the woods. I looked to see what he saw. There was a person coming out from the woods. Jordan was laughing. I guess he thought it was supposed to be a part of this spooky setup. I watched with him until we saw the person come into light, wearing a genuinely horrific mask. And there was something in his hand. A machete. Jordan still thought it was a joke. Even Chris seemed to be laughing a bit. Hell, I started to think it was all just a nice little Halloween setup. Until the person wearing the mask charged at Jordan and swung the machete, only he missed as Jordan backed up in time. We all sprinted back out front where we saw somebody blowing out the torches. He spotted us and started chasing us. We ran all the way down the dirt road, back down the paved road, and made it back to my house. Jordan was throwing up. I'm not sure if it was because of running so much, or because of the fact that he almost lost his life. We told my parents right away. My dad called the police and asked them to come to the house. My dad then drove us to the house where it happened with the police following us. By the time we got there, everything was gone. And by everything, I mean the notes, the torches, and the candy bucket. The house had been vacant for months. Nobody was living there. It was the perfect place to set up a murder scene. We requested the police go inside to check, as I did spot somebody spying on us from upstairs. But it turned out they were gone as well. We did the best we could to describe what happened and the people I saw. I believe one of the officers told my dad they would investigate further into this and thanked us for the info. Maybe you don't realize how sick this world is, full of insane, scary, messed up people, until you actually come into encounter with them.
live in a normal suburban town. It was 4th of July weekend, so I had a mini party in my backyard. My parents were away, so it would work out perfectly. I invited about 20 people. We have a pool, so I told people to bring their bathing suits. I also had some fireworks left over from last year that I told everyone we'd shoot off towards the end of the night. I tried to keep the gathering strictly in the backyard because I didn't fully trust people not to make a mess inside the house. Everything went fine. Anywhere from 20 to 30 people showed up. Everyone stayed in the yard. Some people jumped in the pool, others played drinking games, and later in the night we shot off some fireworks in the street. The party started to die down after 12, and by 1:30 everyone was gone. There were a million red plastic cups in the yard and tons of empty cans and bottles. But that was a mess to worry about tomorrow. I was beat. I went inside and changed out of my clothes and brushed my teeth, then crawled into bed. I was pretty buzzed, so I didn't think I'd have any trouble falling asleep. Suddenly, outside, I heard firecrackers going off. It sounded like it was right outside my window, in our backyard. I got up and looked out the window, and to my confusion and downright horror, I saw a line of firecrackers going off next to our pool. My initial reaction was to yell out the window who did that. I figured it had to be one of my friends who stayed behind pranking me. I ran downstairs into the back door. I slid open the glass door but kept the bug screen door closed. I looked around the backyard and said again, "Who's out there?" By now the firecrackers had finished going off. Someone was back there and they just set them off. That doesn't happen by accident. I texted as many people as I could think to, and then the group chat asking who was still at my house. Only a few people answered, most likely because a lot of people were asleep already. Everyone who answered said they're in bed or at home though. I stepped outside into the backyard and looked around for a minute, and when I saw no one, I went back in, shut the door and locked it, and went back upstairs to my room. I was barely in bed for 5 minutes before hearing something come from the upstairs living room down the hall. Then I heard the sound of a beer pong ball falling off the table and bouncing on the wood floor. My heart started to race. Was someone in the house? Did one of my friends pass out on one of the downstairs couches? Or maybe in one of the other bedrooms? While this seemed like a possibility, I wasn't about to go out there. I got out of bed and went to the door to put my ear up to it and listen. I didn't hear anything for a moment. I waited, and then, clear as day, I heard footsteps approaching my door, then the doorknob jiggling. The door was locked. There was a loud bang on the door. I screamed through the door to get out of here or I'll shoot you. A deep male's voice on the other side said, "Jay, you in there?" And I heard another deep voice in the room with me say, "Yeah." I turned to the corner by my drawers and realized there was someone there. I screamed my soul out as this man came over to me holding what looked like a gun in his hand. He then put his hand over my mouth and told me to shut up or he'd kill me. He then unlocked the door and opened it, and there was another masked man. They whispered to each other as they had me at gunpoint, now sitting on the bed. One of them then said to me, "Stay right there and don't move." The other guy left the room and went straight to my parents' room. He came back and asked the combination to my parents' safe, which I said I had no idea, which was the truth. There were a total of 3 intruders in the house. One kept me at gunpoint while the other 2 pilfered the house, stealing my mom's jewelry that was left out, along with any other valuables they found. After the longest 10 minutes of my life, one of the men yelled, "Let's go," and the man who had me at gunpoint left the room, and I heard them all hurry out the back door. I tried to see what kind of car they left in through a window, but it appeared they didn't park near my house. I called 911 right away. As soon as police arrived, they asked if we had any cameras around the house, which we didn't. They then asked if I got any of the names or saw any of their faces, and all I could give them was that one of them was referred to as Jay by the others. They asked if I saw the getaway vehicle, and I said no. The police asked a bunch of neighboring houses if they had cameras that may have picked up on the robbers, and after my neighbors all reviewed their doorbell cameras, none of them picked anything up. I think my house was targeted by a group who saw I was having a party, and they set the firecrackers off to lead me outside of the house so they could sneak in. That's the most likely explanation to me. My parents were livid with me for having the party, as they believed that led to the robbery. But they also were relieved I'm okay, and sympathetic that I had to experience this. Because of this experience, I'm a strong advocate for having security cameras around your house. It was 4th of July 2015. The park by my house was having their annual fireworks show, but it always gets way too crowded and chaotic. Plus, parking is non-existent. Little did most people know there's a little sump next to the park that had a perfect view of the fireworks show. I found this out through one of my friends one year. This sump was accessible through one of the dead-end residential streets that ran alongside the park. Since the 4th was on a Saturday this year, it would probably be even more crowded, but it would also make a perfect date. I was talking to this girl Ashley I met in one of my classes the previous semester, and we'd already been on a few dates over the course of a few months. I asked her if she'd want to go to the fireworks show with me, and she said she already really wanted to go, so absolutely. She came to my house first, and then we walked from my house to the park since it was so close, and we were bringing alcohol. I told her we'd have our own little private spot to watch the show at that no one else really knew about, and she said she was super down. Along with some tequila and soda, I brought a big blanket for us to lay on in my backpack. There was already a lot of commotion by the park entrance. We walked right past it as the cars were piling up in the parking lot. We continued down the dead end where the sump was. The sump was rectangular and fenced off, but it was very easy to get inside. The gate wasn't even locked. Inside the sump was just a bunch of trees, and then at the bottom of it, a small grass clearing, where we planned to lay out the blanket. I led us to the gate, which yet again wasn't locked, and I quietly opened and closed it. I told her to be careful as we walked downhill into the sump. It was around 8 o'clock, which was when the fireworks were supposed to start. I laid out the blanket on the smoothest part of the ground. I didn't take into account how dark it would be in there before the fireworks started, so we both turned on our phone flashlights and laid them down just as temporary lights. We started making tequila sodas right away. From down in the sump, we couldn't really hear any other people from up in the park, just the occasional car horns honking. It was right around the time we started the first drink that both of us heard something from behind us. It was like the sound of brush being stepped on. We turned around to see darkness. I pointed my flashlight over there, but it didn't really reach that far. The iPhones back then were like the 6s. I don't remember their flashlights being the best. Ashley asked me how likely it was that other people would come down here. I replied that other than a couple of my friends knowing about it, I doubted anyone else would come down. I explained to her that it could have been a small animal. The first fireworks were shot into the air, which startled us. The fireworks would light up the entire sump briefly though, especially the bigger ones and when multiple were shot at once. At this point, we drank and watched the fireworks for a solid few minutes, before again, I heard something behind us. I don't think Ashley heard it, but she looked back when I looked and asked what I was looking at. I said nothing, not wanting to scare her. This was my idea after all, but now I was getting paranoid. I decided to turn around and stare into the trees and brush, and as the sump lit up again from multiple big fireworks exploding, I saw a black figure standing in the trees and brush above us. They appeared to be hiding. I whispered, "There's someone up there." She turned and looked, but now it went dark again because there was a short few-second gap in fireworks. When the sump lit up again, the figure I saw wasn't there anymore. I surely freaked her out though, because she said she wanted to leave. Since we were both definitely creeped out now, we agreed to leave while the fireworks were still going, lighting the sump up. I packed up the blanket and alcohol, and of course the fireworks show ended right there. It was now dark and quiet again in the sump, so we turned our flashlights back on and walked up the hill. As we neared the top, I couldn't help but shine my flashlight into the trees in the general vicinity that I saw that figure before, and I felt my heart skip a beat, seeing a black figure again, maybe 10 feet away. It appeared to be a person in a black hoodie or robe with the hood up, even though it was like an 82-degree night. They were standing behind a big tree, but then, as if in response to the light, they started to run through the brush at us. I pushed Ashley along to hurry up as they yelled to go. We got the hell out of there and basically ran down the street until we were around other people. We weren't followed. I'm not sure what that person was doing in there, but it seemed they were stalking us the entire fireworks show, and them running towards us meant they wanted to hurt us. I only saw one person, so I believe they were alone, but I could be wrong. I stayed clear from going in that sump ever again. After several friends of mine and I were done lighting off fireworks, One of my friends, Zach, took about 4 of us to this unfinished house in a relatively new neighborhood. 2 of the people became disinterested pretty quickly, so they left before we even started examining the house, leaving only 3 of us, Zach, myself, and Adam. None of the walls were completed on the house. It mainly just consisted of floorboards and 2x4s holding up the place. You could see outside in most parts of the house, and the basement had a cement floor and cement walls. The house consisted of 2 floors and a basement, so 3 floors in total. The steps were completed enough so that we could travel up and down them easily. As we started inspecting the house, Zach told us to keep our phone flashlights off as much as possible because the houses next to us were finished and inhabited, and the people living there might call the cops if they noticed us snooping around. We therefore were mainly just going off the moonlight from outside for vision. The 3 of us stuck together most of the time. As soon as we walked upstairs, we could hear a voice from the main floor or the basement, so we would run downstairs to find out what it is, and as soon as we did that, we would hear a noise from upstairs, so we would run up there. This pattern continued for a good while. We assumed the noises were just the wind knocking over pieces of wood, pipes, or whatever else that was lying around, or it was some kind of animal running around the house. Eventually, as we were walking slowly in the basement, trying to discover who or what it was making the noises, I saw someone slowly walking up the stairs next to me. I could see a light emanate from his or her phone, but it wasn't strong enough for me to be able to see who he or she was. I whispered to Zach and Adam, "Is that you?" They both said it wasn't them, and it turns out that they were both right in front of me. Shortly after I asked that, I saw a bunch of pipes that were leaned against the unfinished wall fall over down the stairs. It didn't look like they fell over by accident. It looked like someone deliberately pushed them over. At that point, I knew whatever we were hearing was not an animal or the wind. I knew that someone else was in the house. After that encounter, the 3 of us stormed out of the house. We all stood on the neighborhood road a decent distance from the house discussing what just happened. Zach was convinced that the person I saw was one of the 2 friends who decided to leave earlier. I told him that there was no way it was either of them. One of them was a girl who didn't want to get her shoes dirty, and the other was a guy who was dating this girl and was around her all the time, so I couldn't picture either of them doing that. I tried to convince him that it wasn't them, but he didn't fully believe me. He then realized that he lost his keys and he had to go back in the house to find them anyway. That left Adam and I to stand around to wait for him. As Adam and I were waiting for Zach, I thought I could see a big, dark figure coming from around the right side of the house, but I couldn't tell for sure. We were still trying to not use our flashlights so the neighbors wouldn't notice us. After a few minutes, Zach came back with his keys and said he saw someone in the house again. I told him what I saw. Still convinced that it was our other 2 friends messing with us, he walked around the left side of the house. Adam and I followed him. When he got to the back of the house, I saw him jump up and say, "Run." We ran away. He later said he saw a tall, dark figure reaching his arms up and slowly moving towards him. I ran out to the road in front of the house. I thought both Adam and Zach were following me, but I could only see Zach behind me. When I stopped running, there was a giant dumpster in front of me. I was on the left side of it and Zach was on the other side. I saw Zach look to his right, to an area behind the dumpster that I couldn't see from where I was standing. I heard him say, "We don't want any trouble." He then told me to run to his truck. He drove me to the house in his truck and Adam drove separately. Apparently Adam had already gone to his car. I ran towards the truck and we took off. Zach told me that he saw a big dark figure approaching him. After he said, "We don't want any trouble," he saw the figure going behind the dumpster, heading in my direction, and that's why he told me to run for the truck. Adam later mentioned that as he took off in his car, he saw 3 figures running after him in the rearview mirror. Chances are these figures could have been neighbors messing with us, but the way in which they acted was very strange. Considering how big and tall some of them seemed to be, it's hard for me to believe that they were just teenagers. Zach was in his early 20s, Adam was in his late teens, and I was in my late 20s when this happened. I can't help but wonder who those people were, and how capable they were of doing something far worse than just messing with us and scaring us away. I can't help but wonder if maybe they were some weird members of a cult who regularly got together in that house late at night, and that's why they were trying to scare us away. Since this was the 4th of July, there was a bigger chance of weirdos walking around. But Zach said that there were people who chased after him another time he was at that same house. I wasn't there with him that time, so I can't go into too much detail on that story, but I wonder if those were the same people.
I'm ashamed to admit that my life at one point was so pathetic that I had to resort to using the men seeking women and one-night stand sections of Craigslist, specifically when I was 28. As you'd expect, most of the posts seemed fake or contained images of really fat, gross, or just undesirable women. That is, except for one. There was a posting with a picture of a cute brunette woman saying on the listing, female 26, looking for a quick hookup. No feelings, no relationships, just one night stand. The thing about this photo was that it wasn't a picture of some insanely smoking hot chick. It was just a normal, decent looking woman, making the whole thing more realistic and believable. She left her number on the bottom. I texted her and immediately noticed that she had an iPhone since my iMessage sent a blue bubble. Within seconds, the little gray bubble with the 3 periods popped up, informing me that she was typing. She replied with, "Hi, I'm Jen, but you can call me Jenny." I started to kind of flirt around with her until she gave me her address. As I grabbed my car keys, I didn't know if I should feel excited or ashamed. Minutes later, I arrived to the relatively unlit dead-end block in a rather unappealing area. Second thoughts were popping up now. I shot her a text asking which house she was in. She responded 209, the last house by the dead end. I pulled up to the last house on the street, and sure enough, the little porch light revealed the number 209 stamped onto the house. I'm not gonna lie, it was a shitty looking house. Tiny, single floor, tall grass, and whatnot. I was really doing this. I got out of my car and knocked on her door. There was no answer. Suddenly my phone vibrated. Jenny texted me, telling me to come around back. Why? I asked. The gray bubble indicating she was typing something popped up, then went away. I waited for her to type something, but she didn't. I was a desperate, pathetic man, so against my better judgment, I made my way over to the wooden gate and latched it open. I walked very slowly into the opening of the backyard and froze. I looked up at the windows of the dark house, and my heart skipped a beat when I saw someone staring down at me from one of the top windows. The moment they noticed me, they moved away, and the blinds closed. It must have been Jenny, I was thinking to myself. My phone vibrated. She texted me saying, "I'll be right out, just brushing up." I was shaking now. I don't know if it was because I was nervous about hooking up with a woman for the first time in over a year, or if I was nervous about the weirdness of the situation. I could swear I suddenly heard a stick or something crack from further in the yard. Curiously, I flipped on the flashlight on my iPhone and aimed it over to that corner of the yard. My heart must have flat out stopped for a few moments when I saw what I could swear was an arm moving behind the wooden shed in the corner. I turned off the flashlight and somehow silently left the yard and got back in my car. Before I could shut the door, I heard a window from the house slam open, and a deranged, lunatic-sounding woman who I couldn't see screamed, "Wait, don't go." When I was pulling away from the house, the front door opened, and I heard a loud pop sound. I floored it away from there, and about 5 blocks up, I pulled over and realized I had a flat. They had shot my tire. I tried to get the car as far away from this town as possible before calling roadside service to set up my spare tire. The repair guy found the bullet still in the flat tire. He believed my story and did me a favor of vouching for me in front of a cop. There were 3 people who were arrested, 1 filthy-looking woman and 2 redneck-looking men. They stood trial and were found guilty of God knows what, I don't remember. It's funny, they were too stupid to even evacuate the house after pulling something like that. My mother and stepdad are ranchers. They got a new work truck and put the old one up for sale. A lady from another rural area about 4 hours away was super interested, but gave numerous reasons why she could not even drive halfway to get the truck. My stepdad is nice to a fault, so he convinced my mother to follow in a second vehicle that Saturday so he could drive the truck there. My mom's no fool, and this lady was already making her suspicious. Well, her feelings weren't helped when we arrived, and the lady gave a convoluted story about bank problems and presented a post-dated check. She also begged my stepdad to leave the plates in his name. My mom excused herself, grabbed my stepdad, and had a heated argument about taking the check and the plates. She won on canceling the plates, but she lost on the check. So they drove another 4 hours home, and as anyone not my stepdad guessed, the check bounced when it came to the date it was written. The woman dodged phone calls for a while, eventually answering and giving another convoluted story about being in the hospital and on and on. My stepdad for once stood his ground and told her they'd be taking back the truck. So they drove another 4 hours there, this time with a flatbed in case parts were missing or something. No one answered the door at the property, and they found the truck in the shed and loaded it up. My stepdad had tried to keep my mom from saying what was on her mind, but while he was busy securing the load, she wrote something to the effect of, "Thanks for nothing, hope you enjoyed fucking us around," and slipped it under the door. 15 minutes later, as they're driving home, the cell phone rings, and the lady who was supposedly hospitalized was on the line. She said she knows exactly where they lived and that they made a huge mistake. 2 days later, my stepdad awoke to someone climbing into the house through his bedroom window. I heard my mother's screams all the way from my bedroom, which was one of the most chilling moments of my life. It was the crazed woman breaking in, armed with a knife. I don't know how, but my stepdad managed to take her down even while she was armed. The whole story was shared with police, and then the woman was taken away. I guess karma is a pretty amazing thing. This story took place a long time ago, back in 2002, when Craigslist was in its early years. Many wouldn't know, but back in those days, Craigslist was a lot different. It was a lot more so an online garage sale, or just a place where people would list old things that still had some value that they were willing to give away. I got a basketball hoop, a hockey net, and a spoiler for my car, all free in perfect condition in that same year. You'd be lucky if you found something like that these days. Anyway, me and my son were dying to buy a hockey net so we could practice in the cul-de-sac we lived in. For the record, this was before I got that free one I mentioned. Wouldn't you know it, on Craigslist there was an ad for a slightly used regulation-size hockey goal for only $50. It came with a puck and 2 slightly used hockey sticks. I still have a picture of that ad to this day. It seemed like the perfect deal, but he lived about 2 hours away. I called the number he had listed, and he sounded pretty normal on the phone. He had a pretty deep, dark voice, but nothing that would be off-putting. I remember his voice being a bit emotionless. He agreed to meet halfway due to the distance, said he'd put the stuff in the back of his pickup truck. He said he could only come after he got off from work though, which was much later in the day, way past dark. We agreed to meet at some rest stop off the highway. Me and my son, who was 11 at the time, took my wife's minivan, the only car that would be able to fit that huge thing. Within an hour, we were at the truck stop, which was empty at this hour, but was decently lit by 3 big light posts. I parked right under one of the lights and waited. A pickup truck pulled in off the highway right on time. He stopped right in front of me. I went over to his window, but then noticed there was nothing in the back of his truck. "You Steve?" he asked me. "Yep, that's me," I said. "Alright, my buddy's bringing in the stuff with his truck." The guy pulled up behind my car and put it in park. I suddenly had a bad feeling. I told my son to get back in the car and lock every door except mine. 2 more pairs of headlights came off the highway into the lots, surely enough pulling up next to me. and, not surprisingly at this point, there was no hockey equipment in either one of them. My heart was racing. I was worried. Not for me, but for my young son who I for some reason brought with me on this trip. A group of large men mixed with heavy-set and muscular physiques stepped out of the 2 pickup trucks behind the first one. They eyed me from head to toe, giving that typical intimidation stare down. Then this bald guy wearing sunglasses said in a deep voice, "Where's the money?" I instantly pulled out my wallet and handed it to him, begging him to just let me and my son go. He pulled out like $100 and was pissed, expecting more. He then sent 2 of his goons or whatever to get my son. At this point I screamed and begged for him not to take him. One of the men broke the glass to the minivan back door, and I vividly remember the disturbing, heartbreaking screams of my young son. What happened next was what I can only explain to be a miracle from God answering my prayers. A car was entering the lot from off the highway. All the men stopped and turned to look at it. As it got closer, my heart literally dropped in excitement as I saw it was a police car. The lights suddenly began to flash as he got close enough to see what was going on. All of the men were back in their trucks within seconds, speeding off down the highway. Well, at least 2 of them. The truck in the back was caught immediately by the police car, and backup arrived shortly. I explained everything to them, and they got the men that were caught to rat out on the others surprisingly quickly. I guess luckily the guys in the back truck weren't very loyal to whoever their leader was, if they even had any type of leader. Believe it or not, I had a police escort all the way home to make me and my son feel safer. I don't want to get into all the legal stuff, but I'll just say that all of those men except for one was caught, and I'm pretty sure that was the driver of the first pickup truck. Needless to say, my Craigslist days weren't over at that point, but I've always been much more protective of my son and much more cautious of Craigslist meetings since then.